What's going on, Not Move Nation? Welcome to the Not Move podcast. Today's January 25th at 10:31 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm here with JB Sport Talk. What's good, JB?
What up? What up, my guy?
We have two games today in the NFL. First one kicks off at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. New England Patriots at Denver Broncos. And then at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the Los Angeles Rams at Seattle Seahawks. So let's dive into this New England and Denver game first, since this one is playing first. I'm looking at rotogrinders.com, ROTO grinders.com, at the weather. They're saying that it's cold there in Denver, but otherwise fine. Game
Oh
time
yeah, it's beautiful.
Game time temperatures between the will be in the 20s. Winds are light and no precipitation is expected. All right, and then just for that Rams and Seattle game, they're just saying that there are mild temperatures, light winds, likely no rain, no issues in that game. And then let's look at the any notable injuries on the offensive side of the ball here for Denver. Obviously, their quarterback Bo Nix is out of this game with an ankle issue. Troy Franklin, wide receiver for the Broncos, is questionable to play in this game with a hamstring issue. So usually when players are questionable, there's about a 50-50 chance they play. Other than that, that looks Mac Hollins as well, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, is questionable to play with an abdominal issue. They activated him, the Patriots did, yesterday from the IR, but he's still listed as questionable. Typically, when players are activated from the IR, there's a good chance that he's going to play in this one. But yeah, once again, he is questionable. And then J.K. Dobbins, I heard that there was maybe I heard some chatter that maybe he was going to play in this game, but he will not play in this game for the Broncos today. He's that running back for the Broncos. He's been out for quite some time now. But yeah, so Denver leads the all-time series 31-24 against New England. Um, so if New England were to win today against Denver, they would pick up their 25th all-time victory against Denver on the 25th. Yes, today's the 25th. The home team has also lost the past four meetings between these teams. So Denver's at home today. Not a good trend there for Denver. Let's see what else here. New England, last that I checked, they were favored by about 3.5. Let me double check what they are now. Yeah, New England minus 3.5. So they're favored in this game. And they have the best record against the spread in the NFL this season. They're 13-5-1 against the spread. The Broncos were 8-9-1 against the spread this season. So the Broncos had a losing record against the spread. But the Broncos are 2-0 against the spread as a home underdog this season, whereas New England is 3-1 against the spread as a road favorite. So obviously, Stidham is projected to start here today for Denver. JB, what do you think, man, that he's got to do in this one? Are you thinking just go out there, take care of the ball, and manage the game, or do you think he's going to have to, you know, pick up some a good amount of passing yards in this one, or rush a little bit? What are you expecting from Stidham, and what do you think he needs to do?
I mean, Stidham for sure needs to take care of the ball, but first and foremost, I think he just needs to establish the run and get comfortable. This is probably, I know this is by far the most important game of his career, not just for his team, but in the long aspect of his career of where this could take him longevity wise. If this dude balls out today, and especially if he plays in the Super Bowl, if Bo Nix is not available, you're looking at a guy that's getting a job next year. I think he just needs to establish the run, protect the ball, like you said, first and foremost, and put the ball in the playmakers' hands. Allow the playmakers to do their job and just manage the game. Like that's just what you're there for. Step into that role.
Copy that. Copy that. So sounds like that you think that Denver really needs to establish that run game. Now, Denver throughout the season ranks ninth in passing play percentage. So they like to call a higher percentage of passing plays relative to other teams in the league. So, I'm thinking in this game they might want to try to run it a little bit more as well. New England ranks seventh best in passing yards allowed per game. And then rushing yards allowed per game, they rank fifth. So, relative to other teams in the league, New England is better at defending against that run. But, RJ Harvey, last that I checked, his over under was 41 and a half rushing yards. New England allowed the fifth fewest rushing yards to running backs this season. But Harvey has gone over that line in 7 out of 18 games this season. If we took it to 30 plus, looking at half of his games this season, and then 20 plus rushing yards in 11 out of 18 games this season. If you can even get it to 10, guys, you're looking at 12 out of 18 games. He's never played against New England. He's a rookie. Do you think Harvey goes over that rushing line? And do you think he has to in order for Denver to win today? 41 and a half rushing yards for Harvey, JB.
Yeah, I think Harvey's got to go over that. That is the only way that I see them. They like I said, they gotta have a good game. Harvey, I think he needs to just have an all-around game. I mean, you got to get him involved in the run. New England, I believe, is pretty susceptible to pass catching, receiving running backs.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
another thing that you know what I mean? Like if you get him involved all around in all around scrimmage yards. Now, I know that J.K. Dobbins isn't coming back, and that is actually a blow because I was talking to Southgate, and one of the ideas that he had, and it was really good. I liked it. Was putting Dobbins in the backfield and then throwing Harvey out at like slot. That'd been perfect. So he does it. He lines up there. He catches the ball. He's a thinner running back, and yeah, I thought that'd have been cool. That'd have been good a look for them, but obviously that's not going to happen. So
I'm glad you mentioned that pass catching ability. When I was looking at New England's biggest vulnerability when they are on defense relative to other teams in the league, they are bad at defending against running backs catching the ball. So receptions specifically. They are also vulnerable to those running back receiving yards. Let's talk about it. First, let's talk about the receiving yards. New England ranks 16th worst. So right about the middle of the pack in the NFL in receiving yards allowed to running backs. Harvey's gone over the 22 and a half receiving yard line in 7 out of 18 games this season. He's had 20 plus receiving yards in half of his games this season, 10 plus in 12 out of 18 games this season. And then the receptions, he's hit that at the same rate, over under 3.5 receptions. He's hit that line in 7 out of 18 games this season. If we even took that to 3, we're looking at 11 out of 18, 2 plus receptions, 12 out of 18. If you can get it down to 1, he's hit that in 17 out of 18 games this season. Yeah, once again, he's never played against New England. But, yeah, I think that's a good look, man. Harvey over the 3.5 receptions is probably my favorite Harvey prop. And then it'll go to the receiving yards and then the rushing yards. But, Denver also has McLaughlin there in the backfield. His over-under is 26.5 rushing yards. He's only gone over that in 3 out of 9 games this season. But if we took that to 20 plus, we're looking at 6 out of 9 games this season, and then 10 plus rushing yards in 7 out of 9 games this season. That's also another option there. McLaughlin. And then let's see who else. Stidham Last that I checked, his over under on rushing yards was 16 and a half. New England was slightly above average in limiting rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. Do you think Stidham? You seem like you know a little bit more about him than I do, JB. And I was watching some highlights of him, and it looks like he does have some wheels. Do you think he gets over the 16 and a half rushing yards today? I mean, it's tough to really judge about a quarterback that is backup, but and then I did see I don't know if you're busy right now, JB, or not, but Marvin Mims over under 1.5 rushing yards. What I did see is that New England has allowed the most rushing yards by wide receivers this season. So maybe they do hand it off to Mims today. If you guys, I'm not going to dive into that prop a whole lot, but if you guys do like Marvin Mims over the 1.5 rushing yards, he's the wide receiver for the Broncos, and New England has allowed the most rushing yards to wide receivers this season. Now let's talk about the passing attack here for Denver. New England was really good at defending against wide receivers, receiving yards, and receptions this season. Once again, with a backup quarterback, it's kind of tough to gauge how these receivers are going to do today. Even the tight end position, really the whole team. New England was more vulnerable to the tight end position, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But Cortland Sutton, New England ranked sixth best in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers this season. Last that I checked, Sutton's over-under was 46.5, which he's gone over that line in 12 out of 18 games this season, which is good. And then he has not gone over that line in his only career game against New England. He didn't have any receiving yards in that game, and he was only targeted once. So, with Sutton's receptions over under 4.5, he's gone over that half of his games this year. So he has a better success rate going over those receiving yards, the 6.5 receiving yards, rather than the 4.5 receptions. And then, Pat Bryant. So who do you think, JB, Stidham is going to target more? Do you think he's going to rely on guys like Sutton that are, the number one? Or is he going to be more comfortable going with guys like, Humphrey and Pat Bryant and, even Troutman?
I think it's going to be the latter, like you said. I think it's going to be one of the backups because that's where he gets more of his reps at. You know what I mean? So he's going to feel more comfortable with the backups, my opinion. But, one thing to also remember is to take into account Bo Nix and Stidham attended Auburn together. When Sean Payton took the job for Denver, his very first signing was Jared Stidham. He brought him to the Broncos. He wanted that quarterback. He handpicked him. So in my belief, he wouldn't even went out there and was like, "Yo, I got all the confidence in the world in Stidham." My belief that I do too in that fact, I think that if he wouldn't have landed Bo Nix, I think Stidham would have ended up being his guy to groom. You know what I mean? Give him a couple years. I think he could have been good. So I think though, so there is that taking the effect that he can have a pretty good tenure with Sutton. But like I said, I would look more so at him, targeting the second, third string guys. You know what I mean? More.
Yeah, for sure.
I expect them, but here's the other thing: is Denver has had the number 2 or number 3 best pass blocking offensive line in the NFL, or does right now. So, with that being said, they're able to keep Stidham upright and clean in the pocket. I think he just needs to get those over the middles. You had brought up about them attacking or being able to attack maybe at the tight end level, and I would agree with you, but I just don't. With Denver, I kind of would shy away with that because Ingram he's got bricks for hands, man. They haven't really been able to utilize it. It's kind of like a dud this year. But I would be looking at like a Jordan Humphreys, right, guys? Um, he's been kind of all over the place. I think he got a tutty last week. I think those guys. I'm gonna say it again. Those guys are gonna be your players this week as well. I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at these box scores for the preseason this year for the Broncos, right? And Stidham was actually pretty good. One of these games, I know it's the preseason, but one of these games, he was 14 for 15 through the air, two passing touchdowns. He was sacked a couple of times. And then the other game, 16 for 23, 240 passing yards, two touchdowns, wasn't sacked at all. So in one of these games, yeah, Pat Bryant was the leading receiver there for Denver, followed up with Franklin.
Pat Bryant is back this week as well. I'm pretty sure.
Uh-huh.
And I think Troy Franklin. They're both active.
Last I checked,
After
Franklin is still questionable to play in this one.
really, that's
Yep.
weird because it was thought that Pat Bryant had the more severe concussion. I thought.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here on the FanDuel Daily Fantasy app that Bryant does not have an injury designation for this game today.
Okay.
But and then there was Sherfield, Pat Bryant in this other game that Stidham played in. Pat Bryant was the second leader in receiving yards. So I'm thinking maybe, Pat Bryant here. But New England, and I can go through the statistics if you guys want me to. For the Denver wide receivers, just feel free to let me know in the chat. But I did mention New England's been more vulnerable to receiving yards allowed to tight ends and receptions. We talked about how there's, a good possibility that Stidham passes it to second string, third string players. And I like the fact that Troutman, the tight end for Denver, has gone over his 5.5 receiving yard line in 9 out of 12 games this season. If we took that to 5 plus, we're looking at 10 out of 12 games, 10 plus, 8 out of 12 games this season. Although he has never gone over that line in 2 career games against New England, he only received 1 target in each one of those games. But I think that's a pretty decent look there. And then Troutman's over-under on receptions was 0.5. It was heavily juiced, but he has had a nice success rate going over that. 11 out of 12 games this season, Troutman has had at least 1 reception. Even if it goes to 1.5, he's had 2+ receptions in 7 out of 12 games this season. And then once again, he only received 1 target in each one of those games against New England. He's played 2 career games against them. But, let's talk about this New England side of the ball a little bit more here. Offensively, they were really good at passing this season. They ranked 4th in passing. New England's pretty efficient. They, excuse me, they ranked 26th in passing play percentage. So not very many teams call a higher percentage of rushing plays than New England, yet New England still ranks 4th in passing yards per game. Some may argue that may be because that they haven't played the toughest competition, and that's fair. But all in all, yeah, they are still efficient in that passing game. Denver ranks 9th in passing yards allowed per game this season, and Denver ranks 4th in rushing yards allowed per game. So relative to other teams in the league, Denver's been better at the run, much like New England, right? But New England does like to focus on that run a little bit more than other teams, like I was saying. Drake May we'll talk about his rushing stats here in just a second. Let's get into maybe Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, JB. Denver has allowed the second fewest rushing yards to running backs this season. Stevenson, last that I checked, his over-under was 50.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 6 out of 16 games this season, but he has gone over that line in 3 straight games. If we took that to 40 plus, we're looking at 9 out of 16 games this season, 30 plus rushing yards in 11 out of 16 games this season. He's never played any games against Denver in his career, but he does have more yards per carry in games that his team loses rather than wins in all 5 career seasons that he's been in the NFL. So I do give Stevenson a better chance to go over that 50.5 rushing yard total if New England loses this game. I think now is a good time for me to make my prediction on it. I like New England in this one, man. I've been kind of high on New England all season. And I do actually think Denver has a better chance to win this game without Bo Nix, believe it or not. I think that could sway the public betting percentages and the amount of money that's coming in. And so I would figure that a lot of people will be on New England today, not just money line, but also spread. And if Bo Nix were in this game, I feel like it would probably be the same thing. I'm not sure how the percentages would be. I think it would be really close though. But I would feel even more comfortable with New England in that spot if Bo Nix were playing, believe it or not. But I think Denver's they got a sleepy chance to win this game today. But I still think that the public dislikes New England so much. I think the whole world is kind of wanting Denver to win this game. So I'm still expecting New England to come out on top in this one. JB, what are you thinking about this game? Who do you think wins? And does Stevenson go over this 50.5 rushing yard line?
So I don't man. The thing about New England, they are the ones that drafted Stidham. That is Josh McDaniels' guy. He's offensive coordinator out there, so he knows Stidham's every attribute. He brought him to the Raiders before Stidham went over there to the Broncos. I think that there is a chance, and the NFL is really about stories, right? It's a storyline type of league. What would be a better story than the Broncos winning overtime? Second play from the last of the game, breaks his ankle, season's over. Wait a minute, maybe it's not. If they stay alive, he might be able to play. They come to find out it's not really as bad of a broken ankle as they thought. And they've said that if they're to win this game, if he can apply pressure on his foot, it's not his planting foot. So as long as he can apply pressure on it, he's able to play in the Super Bowl. I mean, what kind of storyline would that be if he came back? Now I get it, like New England's kind of got like the all around experience, right? As far as more Super Bowl experience, playoff experience between coach and player and offensive coach, right? When you got what's his face? Head coach Vrabel used to be a player. He's played in Super Bowls and playoffs. He's coached in playoffs. McDaniels, shoot, dude, 6 Super Bowls or whatever it was he coached in. He's got experience off the wazoo, and uh, man, that's so hard to overlook because that's so important. It's so important. But I think Denver's got a big advantage with the confidence that this team has. My only fear is can Denver get started early or keep it close, right? Because that's the only way that Denver's going to be able to be in the game. They are a fourth quarter team. They're a second half team. They come from behind. That's what Denver does. That's with Bo Nix. I want Denver to win. It's crazy being a Chiefs fan. I want Denver to win. To be honest with you, there's been a lot of teams to do this before. I mean, we look at the Bears, we look at the Broncos. I mean, they carried Peyton Manning to a Super Bowl. The defense did.
Yeah.
You got. This is the Patriots also. It's not even a Pats hater. Look. The Patriots also struggle the most versus backup quarterbacks. So this is going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I heard you say something about Denver possibly getting off to a hot start in order to stay competitive in this game.
Yeah.
I know Denver's without their starting quarterback, but they have scored the first touchdown in 10 out of 18 games this season compared to New England, who scored the first touchdown in 9 out of 19 games this season. So Denver does have a higher success rate in scoring the first touchdown of the game this season. Now, and then I also just had to look at the close games that these teams have played in this season and against each other in the past, right? So Denver is 10-2 this season in games that are decided by 7 points or less, compared to New England, who's 7-3 this season in games decided by 7 points or less. But 4 out of the last 10 games between these teams were decided by 7 points or less. So more times than not, the margin of victory between these two teams when they've played each other in the last 10 games has the margin of victory has been 8 or greater. So just based on what I'm have been talking about a little bit, my prediction is going to be not just New England covers, but New England wins this game by 8 or more points. And if you guys are going with Denver today, I think I saw somebody in the chat saying they're rocking with Denver today.
I'm rocking with Denver. Don't get me twisted. Yeah. Sorry, I had to do something real quick. I'm rocking with Denver.
Yeah. And that's cool. That's respectable. I would not be surprised in the least bit to see Denver cover and or win this game, but that's just how I'm leaning with here. I'm feeling more comfortable about the second game on today. That Seahawks versus Rams game, and we'll get into that. But that's just the way I'm leaning with right now is New England, not just covering, but winning by eight or more points in this one.
Yeah, Kennedy, I know. Yeah, he's won a Super Bowl. He's Sean Payton's a great coach. I thought he's going to do great things with Bo Nix, and he has. I think he's going to continue to do that. That's my biggest worry. I wasn't even so much worried about what's going on in the West with the Chargers as much as I was with the Broncos. So yeah, I agree. I'm not taking anything away from what he has done or doing or will do. But like I said, I got Denver in it because of the altitude, because of the weather. That's a big factor. It's one thing to go in there and get adjusted and acclimated to the altitude, but it's a whole other thing to go and get adjusted to the weather. And I understand it's also cold in Boston and Foxborough, but this is different. You're dealing with altitude and negative temperatures, snow, all that. And in coaching, Sean Payton, I think his defense is just a little bit better than that Patriots offensive line.
So going back to what I was talking about with the Ramondre Stevenson over under the 50.5 rushing yards, I'm going to have to lean towards the under on that one for a couple of reasons. One, Denver's just defended against that running back rushing yard very well this season. Not just that, but Stevenson has only gone over that in 6 out of 16 games this season. And then, I expect New England to win this game. And once again, Ramondre Stevenson has had more yards per carry in his game in games that his team loses rather than wins in all 5 career seasons that he's been in the NFL. So I think I would rather be looking at Henderson and or Drake May for rushing yards. Let's look into it here. TreVeyon Henderson, last that I checked, his over-under on rushing yards was 36.5. He's gone over that 9 out of 19 games this season. If we took that to 20-plus rushing yards, we're looking at 6 out of 19 games this season. And honestly, 36.5 rushing yards. He has the same success rate with 40-plus rushing yards this season. Still 9 out of 19 games this season. He's had 40-plus rushing yards. He's never played against Denver throughout his career, so it's tougher for me to gauge what players are going to do whenever I don't have any history. But I would lean more towards Henderson getting over those rushing yards than Stevenson. And then Drake May. Denver has been more vulnerable to quarterback rushing yards rather than running back rushing yards. Denver is about middle of the pack this season in rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. Drake May has gone over the 30.5 rushing line in 7 out of 19 games this season. If you guys can get that to 10 plus, you're looking at 18 out of 19 games. Drake May has had at least 10 rushing yards in this season. And Drake May, there's a couple of bad trends that I do not like here for Drake May. One of them is that he's had more rushing yards per carry at home than on the road in both career seasons that he's played in. I know it's a small sample size, 2 seasons. This is his second season, but facts are facts. And, he has more rushing yards per carry at home than on the road. And then he has more rushing yards per carry on turf than grass in both career seasons as well. This game is being played on grass. So my favorite rushing prop out of those 3 is going to be TreVeyon Henderson over the 36.5 rushing yards. 30 plus, 10 out of 19 games, 20 plus, 16 out of 19 games this season. And even at 40 plus, same success rate as over 36.5. But let's get into some other stuff here. I know there was a comment here by Blessed Up P. First quarter rushing yards over 13.5 is what he's asking here. And Humphrey over 10.5 receiving yards. I would have to go back and look at, each individual box score that Stevenson has played in this season, Blessed Up P, and just see how many yards he's been getting every first quarter, rushing yards. And maybe you have a software that could help you with that. But I think that would just take me a little bit too much time right now to look it up on the fly. But that's Blessed Up P's favorite play today, guys. And he's there in chat. He's always showing support for us. Shout out Blessed Up P. Thank you for the comment there. He also says that he likes Humphrey for 10.5 receiving yards. Right on, my man. And then let's get into the passing attack a little bit here. What I did notice, and I think that this adds a little bit of benefit for Douglas, the wide receiver for New England. He's had 3 40-plus yard receiving games this season. So he leads the Patriots in 40-plus yard receptions this season. And although Denver has a very good pass defense, they've allowed the 4th most 40-plus yard gains this season, receiving gains. So if you guys like Douglas for any receiving yards or a touchdown today, excuse me, you have that working with you. But let's get into it a little bit more here. We talked about those running backs already, Stevenson. I'll talk about his receiving prop here in a minute. I think I'd rather cover a different position that Denver may be a little bit more vulnerable to, which is going to be the tight end position. All right. Hunter Henry over under 39.5 receiving yards. Denver has allowed the 9th most receiving yards to tight ends this season and the 13th most receptions to tight ends this season. Hunter Henry over under 39.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 10 out of 19 games this season. If you guys can get that at 30 plus, we're looking at a 13 out of 19 games this season, 20 plus, 14 out of 19. Even 10 plus, 10 out of 15, 15 out of 19 games this season. Hunter Henry's had 10 plus receiving yards. And he's gone over the 39.5 receiving yard line in 2 out of 6 career games against Denver, although he was not targeted in one of those games. So it was more like 2 out of 5. And then if you get that to 30 plus, we're looking at 3 out of 5 career games against Denver. He's had 30 plus receiving yards, 10 plus all 5 games in which he was targeted. He's gone over. He's had 10 plus receiving yards against Denver. His career high in a game against Denver was 83 receiving yards. So you can just keep that in mind if you'd like to. And then he has also scored a touchdown in 1 out of the 5 games that he was targeted against Denver. He's scored a touchdown in 1 out of 5 career games against Denver. He's never faced them in the playoffs. What are you thinking about Hunter Henry today, JB? Do you think he gets 40 plus receiving yards? I'm going to have to lean towards him doing that.
Yeah, me as well. I like Hunter Henry. Yeah, I like Hunter Henry today. For the 40 yards receiving. I even like him for a TD.
Yeah,
as well.
I was thinking Henry TD too. We'll get into that here in a moment.
But yeah, I do like that though. I like Hunter Henry as well. New England's got what? Don't they got somebody else too?
Hooper.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Austin Hooper. Tight end.
Yeah, Austin Hooper. Yeah. I forget what his was at. I seen his like a couple days ago.
Yeah, well, I can get into that here in just a second. But yeah, receiving yards allowed to tight ends is really Denver's biggest vulnerability in the passing game. I think even if you include the rushing attack too, they rank 9th worst in receiving yards allowed to tight ends, 13th worst in receptions allowed to tight ends. So relative to other teams in the league at other positions, that is their biggest vulnerability. And then, receptions with Henry, over under 3.5 receptions. He's had a higher success rate going over the 39.5 receiving yard line than the 3.5 reception line. Denver is also more vulnerable to the receiving yards. So I would think I'm going to have to lean towards him, getting those receiving yards more than the receptions, although I could see him doing both. But if we took that to 3 plus receptions, we're looking at 12 out of 19 games this season, 2 plus receptions, 14 out of 19 games this season. And if you can get that to 1 reception, he's got that at least 1 reception in all games this season. He's had 4 plus receptions in 3 out of 6 career games against Denver, although he wasn't targeted in one of those games. 2 plus receptions in every game that he was targeted against Denver throughout his career. All 5 games, he's had at least 2 receptions. His career high in receptions against Denver was 6. I can see him getting both, but I'm going to have to lean more towards those receiving yards. Austin Hooper, you were just talking about him, over under 11.5 receiving yards is what I saw for him last that I checked, which was yesterday. He's gone over that line in 8 out of 15 games this season. If we even took that to 10 plus, guys, if we took that from 11.5 to 10 plus receiving yards for Austin Hooper, we're looking at 11 out of 15 games this season instead of 8 out of 15. Excuse me. And then he's gone over the 11.5 receiving yard line in all 5 career games that he's played against Denver. His minimum was 14 against Denver, and his maximum was 42. And then the receptions, he has a better success rate going over the 11.5 receiving yards this season than the 1.5 receptions. But he's gone over the reception line in 7 out of 15 games this season. If you guys can take that to 1+ reception for Austin Hooper, he's had that in 13 out of 15 games this season, and he's had at least one reception in all 5 career games against Denver. So I feel like I feel like Hooper can get there. I do like his receiving yard line more than the reception line. I think taking it down to 10+ receiving yards and 1+ reception would be the way to go. But let's look into some other stuff here. Denver's next vulnerability in the passing attack. They've been really good at defending against receiving yards allowed to running backs and receptions allowed to running backs, and we can talk about that. But their next biggest vulnerability here is going to be receptions allowed to wide receivers. So we got Diggs over there, wide receiver for New England, Booty, Mac Hollins, Douglas. Who are you expecting, JB, to step up here today for New England? Is it going to be one of those guys? Is it going to
Mac
be
is back.
everybody?
The Mac is back, baby. Mac and cheese, Kraft macaroni. Yeah, I'm a big Mac Hollins fan. Always been. They got a lot of weapons over there, man. Kind of tough to decide like who's gonna go off or not,
Right.
I mean, obvious, dude. So Diggs probably gonna be blocked, wrapped up with what's his face, right? So then you're gonna have what? Their number 2 is probably gonna be bracketed or done. I like booty and Mac Hollins today.
Right on. Yeah, I'll talk about the receptions first and foremost for these wide receivers. Let's see, we got a comment in the chat here from Adrian Kennedy, 1759. Broncos will pressure May a lot, get him confused a little bit. Yeah, absolutely, man. And I haven't really touched on like the general advantages or disadvantages for both of these teams, and I can talk about that real quick. But yeah, Denver, big sacks on the quarterback advantage on both sides of the ball. You mentioned this at the start, JB. Denver has protected their quarterback very well this season. They've allowed the fewest sacks per game to their quarterback. New England ranks 15th in sacks per game this season, so they're about average at getting to the quarterback. But Denver, man, they rank first in team sacks per game, and New England hasn't protected Drake May very well this year. They rank 26 in sacks allowed per game. So there are not many teams that have allowed more sacks to their quarterback per game than New England. How big of an advantage do you think that is for Denver here today, JB?
Huge, astronomical, man.
Especially against a young quarterback like Drake May.
Yup. That's the other thing too. Is this Stidham is coming in as a vet. He may not have played in these, but he's prepped. Yeah, dude. This defense, the advantage for Denver is astronomically huge for that rush. Denver was what, number 1 or top 3, something like that, and defensive or in sacks. This year they had like 20. No, it was more than 27. It was like 30 something, I think, 40 something. Like they were on pace. Like they almost broke that record. Like they call them the Orange Rush for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that Denver can get after Drake May today and cause some problems for him. So I did just want to address that. And then, we were talking about those wide receiver receptions here. Diggs has had over the 4.5 receptions in 8 out of 19 games this season. If we drop that to 4+ receptions, we're looking at 10 out of 19 games this season. 3+ receptions for Diggs. He's had that in 17 out of 19 games this season, and then 2+ all 19 games. He's gone over that line. And then Stephon Diggs has gone over the 4.5 reception line in 3 out of 4 career games against Denver. He's even had 6+ receptions in half of his career games against Denver. His high was 11. So it sounds like you were more interested in maybe like Booty or Hollins to do better than Diggs today. I do like these numbers for Diggs, JB. But I think dropping it to 4+ receptions or 3+ receptions could be the difference maker here for
I
those
think we could
big
get away with like a 3 for sure.
3.
I just don't see much. I mean, you got a younger corner versus an older wide receiver. The corner's by far arguably the best corner in the league. Is the best corner in the league. This is the games that he lives up for. And the other thing is it has been shown in times past that Stephon Diggs drops the big catch in these big moments. You guys, that's another thing to think of. He did it many, 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 many times with the Buffalo Bills against the Chiefs. So
Yeah,
that's another thing to think of.
yeah, for sure, man. And before we move on, I would just like to say thank you to our sponsors: BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right. So then we had, Booty over under 2.5 receptions. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 16 games this season. 2+ receptions, 11 out of 16 games this season for Booty, and then 1+ reception for 15 out of 16 games this season. Mac Hollins, he's gone over his 2.5 reception line in half of his games this season. And even if you took Mac Hollins for 2+ receptions today, you're looking at 11 out of 14 games this season by simply taking that hook out. And then if you can get it to 1+ receptions for Mac Hollins, yeah, he's hit that in all 14 games that he's played in this season. Now, last that I checked, Mac Hollins was technically listed as questionable. I talked about that at the start of the segment. Although he was activated from the IR yesterday. So there's I'm guessing that he's trending towards playing in this game. So, if I were to have to go with either one of those guys, I didn't have time to look at Douglas's reception line. But, if I were to have to go with one of those 3 that I just mentioned, yeah, man, the Mac attack. That I like to target players that are coming off of injury or are questionable to play in games. I think those players are overlooked a lot, and I like the fact that Mac Hollins has at least gone over his 2.5 reception line in 7 out of 14 games this season. I don't know if I mentioned the fact that he's gone over that line in 2 out of 5 career games against Denver, but he also has had at least 1 reception in all 5 career games that he's played against Denver there. So I did just want to mention that information. Once again, I didn't have time to look into Douglas's receiving or receptions. But look, if you guys like Douglas for receiving yards today, I already mentioned that he leads this Patriots team in 40+ yard receiving gains this season. And Denver has allowed the 4th most 40+ yard receiving gains this season. So I think that's a viable option there. And then, the running back, I didn't touch on Stevenson's over under on receiving yards or receptions. Denver's been really good defending against that this season. They rank 2nd best in receiving yards allowed to running backs. They rank 1st in receptions allowed to running backs. Now, Stevenson has gone over his 20.5 receiving line in half of his games this season. If we took it to 10+, we're looking at 12 out of 16 games. He's never played against Denver, okay? And then the reception line, 2.5 receptions. He's gone over in seven out of 16 games this season. So Stevenson has a better success rate of going over the 20.5 receiving yards rather than the 2.5 receptions this season. And Denver is more vulnerable to the receiving yards than the receptions relative to other teams in the league. If you got Stevenson for 1+ reception, and we're looking at 15 out of 16 games, he's hit that this season. So really, like, the last prop that I want to talk about here is going to be the Drake May passing yards. Last that I checked, JB, Drake May passing yards 223.5, right? He's gone over that line in 14 out of 19 games this season. So nice success right there. 200+ passing yards for May, 16 out of 19 games, 175+, 18 out of 19 games this season. Even if you took him up to 250+, 13 out of 19 games this season, he's had that. Do you think Drake May has 225+ passing yards today, JB?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah, I think he does too.
I think it's pretty easy to in the league anymore. You know?
And he's been really consistent with that this year.
Yeah. And this is the playoffs, man. You got win or go home, one last game. It ain't about who's been better all season. It's about who's better this one last time.
Matt Holland's longest reception, says Blessed Up P. Here's a little concern that I have about. Matt Hollins. Okay, yeah, I can get behind that. If he's good at picking up those 40+ yard receiving gains, Blessed Up P, which I haven't had time to look at that, but I know Douglas is, and once again, Denver has been vulnerable to those 40+ yard receiving gains allowed. So. And then just so you guys have an idea of who else is decent here for New England at 40+ yard receiving gains. We had Kyle Williams, wide receiver for New England, have one 40+ yard receiving game this season. And then Ramondre Stevenson, running back for New England, has had one 40+ yard receiving game this season. So if you guys like Kyle Williams and or Stevenson for any receiving yard props, I think that gives you an added benefit. And same with anytime touchdown, right? Because there could be a long touchdown in this game, and that's what we'll dive into next year is the anytime touchdowns. Thank you guys for joining today out there in the audience. If you could hit that subscribe button, we would appreciate it. But thanks for hanging out with us. All right, so anytime touchdowns. I have in my notes here. Let's talk about New England first, JB. I have in my notes here, attack in this order against Denver. Running backs receiving touchdowns. Although Denver has been good at limiting receptions and receiving yards to running backs, they have been vulnerable to allowing running backs catching touchdowns. They rank third worst in the NFL in allowing running backs to receive touchdowns. And Stevenson has had 2 receiving touchdowns this season compared to Henderson, who's had 1. Henderson has also played 3 more games than Stevenson. So that would be my first look here for New England is Stevenson. Stevenson also has 5 red zone targets this season compared to Henderson's 4. And Stevenson has had the second most touchdowns this season for New England. So that would be my first look here. Ramondre Stevenson, anytime touchdown. Drake May, I think, is worth consideration. He hasn't had as many touchdowns as some of these other guys, such as Henderson, Hunter Henry, Booty, but he has ran the ball in 4 times this season, and Denver has allowed they rank 13th best in quarterback rushing touchdowns this season. They've allowed 3 total, but that is their second biggest vulnerability relative to other teams and how they defend against other positions. And then that third look of mine would be Hunter Henry. You know, we were talking about that, JB. He has had the most receiving touchdowns for New England in the regular season. And he ranks first on New England in red zone target share and sixth in the entire NFL in red zone target share. He also has the third most touchdowns for New England this season. So I think Hunter Henry, that's Denver. Denver has allowed 6 tight end receiving touchdowns this season, which does rank 9th best in the NFL, but relative to other teams in the league and other positions that Denver, allows touchdowns to, that's their third. That is their third biggest vulnerability. Who would you say would be your favorite player to look at here for an anytime touchdown for New England, JB, or do you have a couple of players in mind? And what about chat? Chat, who do you guys like for the New England side of the ball for an anytime touchdown?
I like Hunter Henry, and I like Mac Hollins.
Hunter Henry has at least scored a touchdown in 1 out of those 6 career games against Denver. So at least he's got one on the board for us. And then, Mac Hollins hasn't scored a touchdown in 5 career games against Denver. Now, anything can happen, right? Any given Sunday, but Mac Hollins has not scored a touchdown in 5 career games against Denver. The only players that I have listed here, there were a few players that I didn't look up, but between May, Stevenson, Henderson, Diggs, Booty, Kyle Williams, Douglas, Hollins, Henry, and Hooper, the only 2 that have ever scored a touchdown against Denver were Diggs and Henry. So, but who did you say, JB? The New England Shakeup says Austin Hooper for an anytime touchdown. Yeah, I think that could be sneaky, man. A lot of people will be on Hunter Henry, and I think Austin Hooper is going under the radar there a little bit. Hooper does have 2 receiving touchdowns this season. So, and Denver is more vulnerable to that tight end position, scoring touchdowns. They're somewhat vulnerable to it. So, who did you say, JB?
I like you still in New England. Hunter Henry and Mac Hollins, but I like what New England said on there, Austin Hooper too. That's like I said, it's some of the ones that you don't necessarily anticipate. Mac Hollins is coming off of an injury. Hunter Henry has his whole thing. Hooper sounds like like a little Jordan Humphrey for the Broncos.
And we'll get into the first touchdown score of the game too here in just a second, but I have some information about that. But let's talk about on this Broncos side of the ball, JB. Here in my notes, I have that Denver, New England is vulnerable to wide receivers receiving touchdowns. Troy Franklin, he's questionable to play in this game, but if he does play in this game, he led Denver in red zone target share with 18 this season. And then it was Cortland Sutton with 17 red zone targets, Pat Bryant with 7. Who are you thinking, out of this wide receiving corp for an anytime touchdown, JB? A lot of these guys haven't played New England and throughout their careers, and if they have, they've only played a game and they didn't score a touchdown. I don't have anybody that I have in my notes here for Denver that has scored a touchdown against New England throughout history. But, if you were to have to pick a wide receiver, would you go with somebody like, one of these third string we were talking about for receiving yards or receptions, going with maybe a third string, second string wide receiver here for Denver? because Stidham might have a little bit more chemistry with those you know, more of role players. Who would you say, has the better opportunity here out of the Denver wide receiving
I
core?
like little Jordan Humphrey for sure.
Jordan.
I think
Jordan
that's
Humphrey.
their yeah, I like that for the Broncos. Let's see.
I- And I have to dive into this preseason box score a little bit just to see, um, who scored, if he threw to any wide receiver touchdowns. I mean, it looks like Franklin had 2 touchdown. Yeah, it looks like he hit Franklin for 2 touchdown passes in one of the preseason games this season. So it looks like he's comfortable with Franklin. And you already know that if a player's questionable and they end up playing, I typically like that player more. And I think that would be the first look for me if he ends up playing. If not, maybe Pat Bryant.
Yeah, I like little Jordan Humphrey in that aspect just because he's lower on the depth chart, you know. He's been around. He caught one last week. So I think I like him as well as I like Pat Bryant. You seen last week before he got injured, they were trying to utilize him from the very start. They were going to him, so I think that Pat Bryant's a safe deal right there as well. Like you said, Troy Franklin, I would pick Troy Franklin, but we don't know.
And the reason why I'm mentioning these Broncos wide receivers first is because that's where New England was most vulnerable this season. They ranked 7th worst in wide receivers receiving touchdowns this season. Compared to other teams in the league and compared to other positions, that was their biggest vulnerability. The next one being the tight end position, allowing tight ends to receive touchdowns. Now, Evan Ingram, he's only had 1 touchdown this season, but yet he ranks tied for 3rd on Denver in red zone target share. Troutman is another option here. He could be a sleepier player. I
I like
mean,
Troutman as well.
Who else is on there? Nate Adkins. I think, he's somebody that I got to mention. He's the 3rd string tight end here for Denver. If I were to choose one of them, I mean, it's tough for me to choose, right? I would probably go with the more sleepier player. For one, less people would be on it. For two, I mean, there were some players for Denver last week that scored touchdowns, and I was just like, really? This player scoring a touchdown? And this is a big game. A lot of eyes are going to be on this game. I think a lot of people will be on, the big time names to score touchdowns, Stephon Diggs, and
That's what I'm saying. They like one of those like big names. I think will get a tutty. Maybe 2. Just because of odds. But like how it does in regular season, where you can pick all big names, that's out the window. Like you gotta go and look outside the box.
Yeah.
That's why I say like for Denver, little Jordan Humphrey, he's been one of them guys. Booty, he's been one of them guys. I don't know, man.
I will say, RJ Harvey would be my 3rd look here. He ranked 3rd in Denver in red zone target share and leads Denver in touchdowns this season. That's New England's 3rd biggest vulnerability. Now, they've only allowed 2 receiving touchdowns to running backs this season, but Harvey is definitely capable of receiving touchdowns. He's had 5 receiving touchdowns this season. So I think that's definitely an added benefit today if you guys like RJ Harvey for an anytime touchdown today.
I do as well. I like RJ Harvey for anytime TD.
Yeah, I got to go Franklin. and then if he doesn't play, then I suppose Sutton. But once again, man, these third, fourth string wide receivers for Denver are worth consideration for sure. But yeah, it would be Franklin. If he doesn't play, then I suppose I'd go Sutton. And then if he doesn't play, Harvey is the way I would be looking there. And then, I want to just talk about the first touchdown of the game, right? First touchdown scorer of the game. Denver has a higher success rate in scoring the first touchdown of the game this season. They've scored the first touchdown in 10 out of 18 of their games this season, compared to New England, 9 out of 19. So it looks like here, just on my notes, I'm just kind of, browsing my notes a little bit here, and Sutton has been the first touchdown scorer for his team in 5 out of 18 games this season. And in 2 of those games that he scored the first touchdown for his team was actually the first touchdown of the game. It seems like, some of these were Bo Nix, So he scored a first touchdown of the game in 2 games this season. If you guys were thinking about Franklin, he has not scored the first touchdown of the game in any games this season. Dobbins isn't playing. Adkins, we talked about him, the tight end there for Denver. Nate Adkins, he has scored the first touchdown of the game in week 6. And then Harvey scored the first touchdown in week 8, and that was the only week that he had a first touchdown score. And even McLaughlin has a first touchdown score. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's and even Bandy. I just got to mention Bandy. Denver defense has had one. So, I mean, statistically, Sutton looks like the most sense here. And then, the Patriots on their side of the ball, I already mentioned Douglas, the wide receiver for New England, has a, that 40-plus yard receiving gain advantage here today. And he has scored the first touchdown of the game in 3 out of 19 games this season. So,
I like Douglas as well. That's another guy out.
He did it last week, I believe, against Houston, right?
Yep.
But even then, he had scored the most first touchdowns of the game for his team throughout the regular season, or throughout the entire year. So now he's scored the first touchdown in 3 out of 19 games. He scored the first touchdown for his team in 4 out of 19 games this season. The only player for New England that has scored the first touchdown for their team more than Douglas is Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry has scored the first touchdown for the New England in 5 out of 19 games this season, but he's only scored the first touchdown of the game in 1 out of 19 games. So if I were to be going with like a Hunter Henry first touchdown, I think I'd have to, lean more towards him being the first touchdown scorer for his team rather than the game. I would feel more comfortable, with Douglas first touchdown scorer of the game, even though he did it last week. And I don't know if I can look real quick. Yeah, Douglas has not scored the first touchdown of the game in back-to-back games this season. So, anyways, so that's just kind of there. But yeah, Marcus Jones, I got to mention him. Punt returner for New England. He has scored the first touchdown of the game in 1 out of 19 games this season. In both of the times that he did score the first touchdown for New England was on a punt return. So, New England does have that punt return capability of taking one to the house. I didn't have time.
Yep.
I didn't necessarily have time to look up Denver's.
Denver does too with Marvin Mims.
But you guys have time to. And then let me see before we move on. I think there were some questions here. Betters, did you say you liked RJ Harvey for receiving yards? Let's go take another gander here.
Denver's got one punt return this year for a touchdown. It was a 70-yarder by Marvin Mims.
And what about allowed? Do you see anything about punt return yards allowed or touchdowns allowed by Denver's punting units or kickoff unit? You know, I called that Shaheed one the other day or last week. I'm not necessarily, you know, thinking it happens again today, but it's definitely worth looking into. I just didn't have the time.
It's like field goals attempted. It's been 32. He's made 28. He's made 50. He's made 450 plus. Will Lutz for Denver as well. His longest has been 57 of the season. Denver's punting. I don't see any touchdowns given up there either. As this is just NFL.com.
Yeah.
Just looking at the stats. I didn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same thing here. It's got like passing, rushing, receiving, fumbles, tackles, interceptions, and stuff there at the top. Anyways,
yeah, it goes down to like info or review stats streams, and you go season stats, Broncos, Patriots, Broncos. That's head-to-head matchup. Then you click on one, and then it goes down to like you said, Denver rushing, passing. Yeah, you go all the way down to the very bottom is special teams, punt returns, punting, and so just right there, just looking over that briefly, they haven't allowed any. It's going off of this information. You know, the information that I'm looking at.
You know, but if new, I'm not going to look into all of it, but I do want to give the audience, Marvin Mims for the Broncos had the most punt return yards this season and averaged the third most punt return yards in the NFL. So if you can find if New England has been vulnerable to punt return yardage allowed, that can shorten the field for Denver significantly, having the guy who has had the most punt return yards this season and averaged the third most punt return yards in the NFL. So if you guys like Denver today and New England's been vulnerable to that, I think that could be a big factor in this one. And then I do just want to mention real quick, anytime defensive touchdowns. I looked in their last 10 games these teams have played against each other. New England has had one defensive touchdown, which was a fumble 6, and they've had 2 special teams touchdowns in their last 10 games against Denver. So I know on some books it'll say like defense/special teams touchdown, anytime touchdown score. Yeah, 3 times. New England's had 3 of those in the last 10 games against Denver, compared to Denver, who's only had 1 defensive touchdown. I think it was Von Miller, but it was a fumble 6 recovery in their last 10 games against New England. So not, I have seen better history for anytime defensive touchdowns with other games throughout this season. But if I were to lean towards one here, I would lean more towards New England getting a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown. But I would also have to look at the special teams, punt return yards allowed, kickoff return yards allowed by Denver, vice versa, and all that stuff. But anyways, what's your final score prediction here, JB? I'm just going to rock with the 31-13 final score. And I know we had some questions that I'll address before we move on to the next game. But, 31-13 New England.
I'm going to go with what AI did up here. AFC Championship on the left, right above you. It says 24-21. I'm going to say 24-21 Denver.
Yeah, but once again, guys, like I feel more confident in the other game. I think with a backup quarterback coming in, there's some variables that we just all haven't seen throughout the season, So if you guys are on the Broncos spread or money line, I would not be surprised to see Denver cover and or win this game. But that's just my pick. But if you are on Denver today, best of skill to you, luck, whatever you want to consider it as. And then here in the the crowd, betters, you said you liked RJ Harvey for receiving yards. Yeah, I think that's a good look there. Um, he's gone over the 22 and a half receiving yards in 7 out of 18 games this season. New England has been more vulnerable to receptions allowed to running backs rather than the receiving yards allowed to running backs relative to other teams in the league. So, I think receptions may be the better way to go than the receiving yards, although I could see them both hitting. 2+ receptions for Harvey, 12 out of 18 games this season. 3+, 11 out of 18. And then receiving yards. Even if, even taking it from 22 and a half to 20 plus gives you a higher success rate. It takes you from 7 out of 18 games this season to 9 out of 18 games this season. So, I know some of you like to toggle those lines down a little bit. So that's probably like what I would feel more comfortable with there, Blessed Up P. Once again, I just don't know what we're going to necessarily get from Stidham today. What are you thinking, JB? Do you think that he's going to hit Harvey a little bit in this one? I'm thinking, Harvey for 20 plus receiving yards and 3+ receptions.
Yeah, I like it. I like that, or the 3 and 15. 15 plus. But I like Harvey. I like him for. I like him for that. I like him for the what you said, and then add a TD for it. Make it all around. The guy's gonna get in the end zone at some point. He's gonna get the ball. He's a big focal point of their offense. On top of that, especially with Bo Nix being out, like I said, they're gonna have to utilize every option to keep Stidham up and comfortable.
And I'm going to just try to quickly address as many questions as I can there, Blessed Up P. You were asking about who has the most like pick sixes or fumble sixes for Denver this season on the defensive side of the ball. And that is going to be McMillan, cornerback, has 1 defensive interception this season, pick 6. And then nobody's had a fumble. So, Denver has really only had, and that was a surprise to me, Denver's only had 1 defensive touchdown this season. So, I know defensive touchdowns are kind of, tough to come across, but I was expecting at least 2 from Denver this year. But maybe they'll get one today. Who likes to throw interceptions on the Broncos? Oh, who has the most interceptions is what he's asking as well. They're on the defensive side of the ball for Denver. Tillman, McMillan, both have 2 interceptions apiece there for Denver. One of them's a linebacker. One of them is a cornerback. And there's a few other guys with 1 interception this season. Moss and, just some other guys here. I'm looking at ESPN.com, okay? And then fumble recoveries, there's 3 guys on Denver with 1.
Dude, how many sacks do the Broncos have on defense this year?
Throughout the regular season, sacks, they've had 68. And we can look it up real quick. Record for team sacks in a regular.
Drake May has been sacked 47 times, regular season.
The Chicago Bears have the most. They have the record for team sacks in a regular season. 72 in 1984 is what I'm seeing here. So Denver was 4 sacks away from tying the all-time record.
Drake May only thrown 8 interceptions this year, but I think he throws an interception today.
Anyways, sorry if I missed any questions there. I do my best to try to address all of your questions. But hopefully that helps, guys. So, let's move on to the next game here, JB. Unless you got anything else to say about that one.
Nope.
Cool. All right. Rams at Seahawks. The Seahawks lead the all-time series 29-28 against the Rams. But the Los Angeles Rams, they used to be the St. Louis Rams, as many of you know. The Los Angeles Rams have a 13-8 all-time record against the Seahawks. Matt Stafford, the quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, has a 7-4 record against Seattle in the regular season. And then he lost his only playoff game against them in 2016. So technically he's 7-5 all time against Seattle. And then Sam Darnold, quarterback for the Seahawks, has a 2-3 regular season record against the Rams. And he also lost his only playoff game that he played against the Rams in 2024. So he's 2-4 all time against the Rams. So Stafford has a better record against the Seahawks than Darnold has against the Rams. Injuries in this game. Charbonnet, the running back for Seattle, he's out with a knee issue. And, Seattle, I think if you guys want to know how Seattle plays without Charbonnet, week 3 will give you a good idea because that is the week that he missed. And that's a huge blow to the Seattle team because he leads this team in touchdowns. So, week 3, they played the Saints. So
I think the only reason that I think they're kind of skewed. Reason why he leads his team in touchdowns. Meaning they use Walker to get down to the goal line and they throw Charbonnet in there.
mm-hmm.
It's like last year with Jalen Hurts getting his 11 tutties on the tush push.
And in that week 3 game that they were without Charbonnet, they had Kenneth Walker rushing for 2 touchdowns, I believe. Let me double check that. Week 3 here against the Saints. Kenneth Walker, 3-yard touchdown rush, 1-yard touchdown rush. So he was that goal line guy in that game. Although they had a couple other guys get some carries. So Holani and Wright. Kenneth Walker had 16 carries in that game. It was a blowout. So one has to, I would go in and maybe look to see if Walker was getting a bulk of the carries early in the game. And then as Seattle was, around halftime, after halftime, Seattle was up 38-6 at halftime in this game. So maybe that's when they got some of these other running backs involved. And it's just, will Seattle do that same thing today? Will they, will they just feed Kenneth Walker if it's a close game, or if they start running away with it, or maybe they start getting blown out? Will they hand it off to Holani and Wright and some of these other guys? But anyways, let's keep in mind though that Rashid Shaheed did not play in that game, right? He was acquired by the Seahawks later in the season. So I had, Blessed Up Pete down there in the chat write me before we got live, JB. And, he said that, he likes, Shaheed for, I forget the exact number, but it was under 5.5 rushing yards, I believe. So last week when Charbonnet left the game in the second quarter against San Francisco, the very next play, they handed the ball off to Shaheed for a 30-yard carry.
Wow.
He had 2 carries. Shaheed had 2 carries in that game. And then just worth noting, the Rams have allowed the 10th most rushing gains to wide receivers this season. So, there's limited information to look at when it comes to like receivers rushing, but I think that is a decent look there. Blessed Up, he maybe a little bit more than decent. I would have to also look at like Shaheed's history against the Rams rushing and some other things. This season as well. Is he carrying the ball this season? And I think, today with Charbonnet being out, there is a better chance of some trickery, so get a little bit more creative with that play calling. Now let's talk about, against the spread. Before we even dive into this game any longer, who are you leaning with in this one, JB? Seattle is favored by 2.5 points.
Yeah.
In chat, who are you guys leaning with in chat?
I mean, as of right now, I'm kind of leaning towards the Rams. You got the possible league MVP, Matt Stafford. I just don't. I mean, it's happened, but I mean, I don't know. I think I could see, a Broncos Rams Super Bowl. Huh.
Yeah, I like the Rams in this one as well. If I were playing the spread, I would probably take that up to plus 3.5. But I do think the Rams are going to win this game there on that money line. I do have the Rams winning this one, but let's talk about it a little bit more and give you guys a reason why I like the Rams here today. So the Rams have the most passing yards per game out of any team in the league this season. And they have an overall pretty balanced play calling style. They do call a few more passing plays relative to other teams in the league. They rank 13th in passing play percentage. Seattle ranks 8th in passing yards allowed per game. And then Seattle's rush defense, they rank second best in rushing yards allowed per game. So I think that, this is really an ideal matchup for the Rams because they do like to pass the ball more than other teams in the league with their play calling percentage. Not just that, but Seattle is more vulnerable to that pass than they are against the run relative to other teams in the league in regards to yards allowed per game. So let's talk about some of these receiving props for the Rams here. I'm just trying to see where, Seattle's been most vulnerable. Seattle's actually been really good at limiting wide receivers, receiving yards. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Really, it looks like Seattle's been really vulnerable to receiving yards allowed to receptions allowed to running backs. They've allowed the most receptions allowed to running backs this season. So Kyron Williams, over under 2.5 receptions. He's only gone over that line in 6 out of 19 games this season, but he has, gone over that line in his last 4 out of 5 games this season. And then he's had, if we took that down to 2+ receptions, I mean, this is pretty crazy here. I don't see this a whole lot where we get this much value out of toggling it down from 2.5 to 2+. He's had 2+ receptions in 13 out of 19 games this season. Compared to if you went over the 2.5 reception line, he's gone over that in 6 out of 19 games this season. So by taking that hook off, you're getting an extra 7 games where he's hit that line this season. And then if you can get that to 1+ reception, you're looking at 7 out of 19 games this season. Now, he's only hit the over 2.5 reception line in 1 out of 6 career games against Seattle, although he wasn't targeted in one of those games, nor did he have a rush attempt. So it's more like 1 out of 5 career games against Seattle. He has had 2+ receptions in the same amount of games that he has had 3+ receptions against Seattle throughout his career, which is, one game. He had exactly 3 receptions in the game that he did go over that line. And then if you got that at 1+, he's had that in 3 out of 6 career games against Seattle. Okay. So, I think the 2+ is looking pretty solid there. Obviously, if you're looking for more of like uh, a, a building block, 1+, if you can get it at 1+. I like his history with 1+ receptions against Seattle more than um, the 3+ or 2+. But I do like the fact that he's hit 2+ receptions in 13 out of 19 games this season. And then the receiving yards, Seattle, they allowed the 6th most receiving yards to running backs this season. Kyron Williams, last that I checked, his over-under was 12.5 on receiving yards. He's hit that in 11 out of 19 games this season. And he's hit that in 5 straight games. Kyron Williams, he's hit 13+ receiving yards in 5 straight games. He's actually had 10+ receiving yards in 7 straight games. If you guys are into those, what are you doing for me now instead of what have you done for me in the past type of deal. And then he's had 10. I mentioned he's had 10+ receiving yards in 7 straight games. He's had 10+ receiving yards in 14 out of 19 games this season. And then he's gone over the 12.5 receiving yard line in 2 out of 6 career games against Seattle. And then we'll get into that touchdown stuff here in a bit. So there you have it for Kyron Williams. And then the tight end position looks like that's where Seattle's next vulnerability is. Honestly, well, I mentioned that Seattle allows the 6th most receiving yards to running backs. They allowed the 6th most receiving yards to tight ends as well, and the 5th most receptions to tight ends. So technically, Seattle is most vulnerable to receptions allowed to running backs, and then it's going to be receptions allowed to tight ends. So who are you thinking, JB, out of this tight end corp for the Rams? Because they have many guys, Parkinson, Higbee, Terrence Ferguson. Who are you thinking, if you had to pick one of these guys? Who are you naturally feeling like, JB?
I like Parkinson.
Yeah, I think you said that last week, and I think he did pretty decently. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. He did pretty decently. I like Parkinson.
I think he maybe even caught a touchdown.
Yeah, I believe so.
I got it in my notes here somewhere. Parkinson, yeah, 1 receiving touchdown in the playoffs. Yeah. So you're leaning with Parkinson again today?
Yeah, I'm gonna lean with Parkinson, and then my second choice would probably be Higbee, maybe Fergie. I don't know. Yeah, probably Higbee after that in the tight end position.
Somebody's saying something about red zone defense. Maybe he was talking about the Denver game. Got Perry there. Yeah. When I did my research, I saw that, New England, let me just go back to that game real quick. New England wasn't great at converting touchdowns when they entered the red zone, and Denver ranks 2nd best in the NFL in limiting, and maybe it was tied for 1st, but Denver's really good at limiting their opponents from scoring touchdowns when they do enter the red zone. So New England's done a pretty good job at getting into the red zone as a team. And I think, we came across a situation like that last week. Somebody asked me a question about how I thought New England was going to counter the fact that Houston was really good at preventing teams from scoring touchdowns when teams were entering the red zone against Houston. And I countered that with New England is a top 10 team at getting into the red zone per game, and Houston allowed their opponents to get into the red zone like more than any other team in the league. So I thought there were just going to be a lot of opportunities last week for New England. I don't necessarily think the same thing here today. Denver is good at limiting their opponents' red zone attempts as well. So, but let's continue to talk about this tight end corp for the Rams. JB said that he'd be leaning towards Parkinson. I don't want to necessarily bore you guys with a lot of statistics unless you want that. So just feel free to let me know in the chat. But, Blessed Up P said that he likes Higbee receiving yards. And when I'm looking at the success rates for this season, that looks good. Blessed Up P. I see Higbee over under 15.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 9 out of 11 games this season. He's hit that in 5 straight games. And even if we took that to 10 plus, we're looking at 10 out of 11 games this season. He's played 18 career games against Seattle and has gone over the 15.5 receiving yard line in 12. He said, bore away, please. He's gone over the 15.5 receiving yard line in 12 out of 18 career games against Seattle. We're talking about the tight end Tyler Higbee here for the Rams. Now, he did not go over that line in the 2020 playoff game. He had 4 receiving yards in that game. But he also had a game where he wasn't targeted in those 18 games, right? So more like 12 out of 17 games, Blessed Up P. Higbee has gone over that 15.5 receiving yard line against Seattle throughout his history. And then, we'll talk about anytime touchdowns here in just a minute. And then, receptions, I think, is another viable option here. Higbee, I'm looking at Parkinson, Higbee, and Terrence Ferguson's reception line success rate, and I'm seeing that Higbee has the best success rate with that as well. He's gone over the 1.5 reception line in 8 out of 11 games this season. If you want to take that hook off, you're looking at 10 out of 11 games this season. Higbee has had 1+ reception. He's gone over the 1.5 reception line in 12 out of 18 career games against Seattle as well. Although he wasn't targeted in one of those games, okay? And then he's had 1+ reception in 17 out of 18 career games against Seattle. So if you want to take Higbee for 1+ reception today, he has got that in 17 out of 18 career games against Seattle. And the one time that he didn't, he just wasn't targeted in that game. All right. But yeah, we got Ferguson and Parkinson Parkinson. JB said that he liked Parkinson. I could see it. He's gone over the 25.5 receiving yard line in 10 out of 16 games this season, so more times than not. And he's gone over that in 4 straight games. Now, he just hasn't gone over that line in any career game against Seattle. He's played 4 career games against Seattle. Parkinson has. The most receiving yards he's had in a game against Seattle is 21. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind with Parkinson. If you're into those historical facts, there you have it. And then Parkinson has never gone over his reception line in any career game against Seattle either. There was a game where Parkinson wasn't targeted, so let's count it as 0 out of 3 games of going over that 25.5 receiving yard line. But same with the receptions. He's only gone over the 2.5 reception line. He hasn't gone over that in 3 career games against Seattle. He's had 2 receptions in a game, another game where he had 2 receptions, and then 1. So, yeah, right now I'm leaning more towards Higbee. And then, Terrence Ferguson, he has gone over his 14.5 receiving line in at least 1 out of 2 career games against Seattle, but he wasn't targeted in one of those games. So it was really like his only game against Seattle. He had 33 receiving yards, right? He had 33 receiving yards, and he had exactly 3 receptions in that game. We're talking about Terrence Ferguson, tight end for the Los Angeles Rams. So, all in all, I like Higbee's, the props that I listed for Higbee most out of those tight ends. And then it's going to be Ferguson, and then it's going to be Parkinson. But the fact that JB likes Parkinson makes me, consider Parkinson just as much as Ferguson, I would think, just because, JB called Parkinson last week, and, he did pretty good from my understanding. He at least caught a touchdown pass, right? And we'll get into those anytime touchdowns. But, JB, I think what everybody really wants to talk about or listen to is, maybe enough about the Kyron Williams receiving props and the tight end receiving props. What about these big names for the Los Angeles Rams? Nakua, Devontae Adams, JB. Who do you think has the biggest impact today out of those two for the Los Angeles Rams today?
Man, that's tough. Obviously, everybody should. Puka, I think, is obviously. I don't know. What did Puka do last time that they played? He had a decent game, I think.
Yeah, he had a career high in receiving yards, 225 receiving yards, which I don't know if I don't think I did a live stream about that, but I saw it coming, man. I saw that game coming.
What is the weather gonna be like?
Weather, I didn't see any weather concerns in this one, man. I see, according to rotogrinders.com that there are some mild temperatures, light winds, likely no rain, no issues is what they're saying here.
I like Puka, obviously. I don't think anybody needs, but yeah, I think Puka is the guy for their wide receivers. I think Adams might get you like a 40 yards or something like that, maybe a TD, but I think he's pretty much dude. I think this might be his final run.
Mhm.
He hasn't got too much separation, and I don't know that. I've been kind of, I haven't been as pleased with Devontae this year, but it's the playoffs though. Devontae can come out and shine in the playoffs, NFC Championship. These are his games. Man, but just Puka's just unstoppable, man. I think I like Puka over them all. It's just the money lines and stuff like that with them, and so I would like to pick like a different guy, like I said, a no-namer, or maybe not a no-namer, but somebody. I'm gonna go with Mumfield.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe a Tutu Atwell, to kind of get things, like I said, I think. Not Devontae, but Puka obviously, is a no-brainer. But like I said, it is the playoffs. Look for McDonald to really be focusing on those guys, just like I expect every other coach to do, is focus on the playmakers. So the coaches are going to have to pull the bunny out of the hat and look somewhere else. Think outside the box. So I'm going to, thinking outside the box today.
Yeah,
that's what all
fair
my
enough.
picks are going to be. I might get, like a solid, you get the ones that you know what I mean? Make you a ticket, the guys you really think, your Puka, maybe, Higbee and Williams, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've made those all playoffs, dude, and I have not hit them, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the no-namers that have been hitting. You might, like I said, put Puka in there, and then, make you something with some crazy shit, maybe even just a two, or, put a Mumfield in there or Atwell.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, man. There will be a lot of eyes on these games today, and I feel like the more eyes on a game typically is the more times that we see these players that are going under the radar have successful games. So, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm going to mention it now. Seattle allowed the second fewest receiving yards to wide receivers this year, and the 8th fewest receptions allowed to wide receivers. Puka Nacua over under 94.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in half of his games this season. If we took it to 90 plus, 10 out of 18 games this season. It's when we take it to 70 plus is when we see a big increase of success. He's had 70 plus receiving yards in 14 out of 18 games this season, 60 plus 15 out of 18. If you can get that to 50 plus 16 out of 18 games this season, heck, maybe you got it. Maybe the line has increased, or you're thinking about taking him for 100, 125, 150. He's had 100 plus receiving yards in 7 out of 18 games this season, 125 plus receiving yards in 5 out of 18 games, 150 plus 4 out of 18 games this season. He's gone over the 94.5 receiving yard line in 2 out of 5 career games against Seattle. But if we drop that to 70 plus, we're looking at 4 out of 5 career games against Seattle in which Nacua has had 70 plus receiving yards. And then I already mentioned that he had a career high in receiving yards at Seattle. This game's being played at Seattle again here today. At Seattle earlier this season, he had 12 receptions, 225 receiving yards. Here's what another thing that I'll say about Puka Nacua is that he has more yards per catch in games that his team wins rather than loses in all 3 seasons that he's played in the NFL. So if you like the Rams to win today, I do give Nacua a better chance of going over those receiving yards than not. And I said that last week. Nacua has more yards per catch in games that his team wins rather than loses in all 3 seasons. So if the Rams won last week, I liked Nacua to go. I'd give Nacua a better chance of going over those receiving yards if the Rams won, and they did. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before. I think it was last week though. But and then the receptions, he has the same success rate with the receptions this season. He's gone over the 7.5 receptions in half of his games this season. And if we take it to 7 plus, we're looking at 7 plus receptions. We're looking at 13 out of 18 games this season. 6 plus receptions, 14 out of 18 games this season. If you can get it to 5, we're looking at 17 out of 18 games this season. He's had at least 5 receptions. And then he's gone over the 7.5 reception line in 2 out of 5 career games against Seattle. He's had 7 plus receptions in 3 out of 5 career games against Seattle. I mentioned that he's had 7 plus receptions in 13 out of 18 games this season, right? If we combine that with the fact that, he's had 7 plus receptions in 3 out of 5 career games against Seattle, both of those, give you a higher success rate. And then, he's had 5 plus receptions in 4 out of 5 career games against Seattle. The max that he's had is 12, right? Which was earlier this season at Seattle. So, I think, if you wanted to get real safe with it, 5 plus receptions and, 50 plus receiving yards. I still like the fact that he's had 70 plus receiving yards in 14 out of 18 games this season. And then 70 plus receiving yards in 4 out of 5 career games against Seattle. So I think 7's the lucky number here for Nacua. 70 plus receiving yards, 7 plus receptions. Although if you keep bumping that down, you do get a higher success rate. Just the payoff is not as good. Davante Adams, over under 47.5 receiving yards. He has a better success rate going over those receiving yards than Nacua does going over his this season. Davante Adams, over under 47.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that line in 11 out of 16 games this season. If you're thinking, I'm going to drop it down to 40, still the same thing. He's had, he's gone over the 47.5 receiving yard line, the same amount that he's had 40 plus receiving yards, 11 out of 16 games this season. So in just that regard, I see no value in taking him from 47.5 down to 40 plus, unless historically he's had a good success rate with 40 plus instead of the 47.5. Anyways, if we got Adams at 30 plus receiving yards, 13 out of 16 games this season, 20 plus, 15 out of 16 games this season. He's gone over the 47.5 receiving yard line in 5 out of 9 regular season games against Seattle, but he wasn't targeted in one of those games. So it was more like 5 out of 8. And then he's gone over that 47.5 receiving yard line in 1 out of 2 career playoff games against Seattle. So all in all, in those 11 games, career games against Seattle, he has gone over this line and 47.5 receiving yard line in 6 out of 11 of those games. So more times than not. And then once again, he wasn't targeted in one of those games. 70 plus receiving yards in 5 out of 11 career games against Seattle. Okay. Let's see. Let me just look here in my notes. I got a lot wrote here. Okay. The most receiving yards Devontae Adams had in a playoff game was versus Seattle, which he had 160 receiving yards. So Puka Nacua has his career high in receiving yards against Seattle earlier this season. And then Devontae Adams has the most receiving yards he's ever had in a playoff game against Seattle. So two of these guys, two of these big weapons here for the Rams today, man, have set career numbers against the Seattle team. So for statistically, Adams has a better success rate going over these receiving yards this season than Nacua. I would feel just a little bit better, maybe taking Adams for, JB. I heard you say like 40 plus. I think that's still cool. Yeah. I wouldn't take it from 47.5 to 40. If I were to take it from 47.5 down, I would take it to 30. I just don't see any value with taking it to 40. I would either leave it or get it to 30 plus. The reception line, he's had, last that I checked, his over-under on receptions was 4.5. But if we take that hook out, if we go from 4.5 to over 3.5, we're going from 7 out of 16 games this season where he's had 5 plus receptions, but he's had 4 plus receptions in 13 out of 16 games this season. So there's a big difference there if we take that hook out for his receptions. And then, he's gone over the 4.5 reception line in 6 out of 11 career games against Seattle, but more like 6 out of 10. So there you have it with those guys. JB, I know you were talking about maybe like Mumpfield or Whittington. I didn't have time to look at Mumpfield or his props were just not available, right? His receiving props were not available.
That's possible.
Whenever I was looking. But Whittington, he's had gone over his 7.5 receiving yard line in 8 out of 16 games this season, 5 plus receiving yards in 11 out of 16 games this season. Whittington, here's the thing about Whittington is he has more yards per catch, wide receiver for the Rams. Whittington, he has more yards per catch in games that his team loses rather than wins in both of the seasons that he's played in the NFL. So if you think the Rams lose today, I do give Whittington a better chance at getting over the 7.5 receiving yard line. Also, Whittington does have more yards per catch on turf than grass in both of the seasons that he's played in. This game is being played on turf. So just based on that alone makes me, makes me think Whittington has a better chance of going over the 7.5 receiving yard line. But if the Rams lose today, I like it even more. Rams. I think I saw a comment here from Blessed Up P saying that he likes Stafford over 0.5 rushing yards. I think there was like a historically bad beat about that last week or the game before where Stafford hit it. We talked about it too. Stafford got over the rushing yards and then he kneed the ball down a couple times, which caused him to get 1 rushing yard or something, or 0 rushing yards technically. So, that
Yeah,
could always
no.
happen, and anytime you're taking a quarterback for rushing yards, you have to
Yeah, it was last week.
downs.
Bust up brought it up about him, or maybe it was me or something. It was about a 1 yard. It's like 1.5 or point 0.5, and I was said that, and you're like, yeah, but the kneeling. I was like, yeah, no, that's good. Respect. I'm not doing that.
Seattle has been somewhat vulnerable to rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. They're about average in that category, right? And Stafford has only had 1+ rushing yard in 6 out of 19 games this season. But look, he's had at least 1 rushing yard in 6 out of 12 career games against Seattle, and he actually had 15 rushing yards in his only playoff game that he played against Seattle back in 2016. Matt Stafford has more yards per carry in games that his team loses rather than wins in 16 out of the 17 NFL seasons that he's been in. In 16 straight seasons, Stafford has more yards per carry in games that his team loses rather than wins. Now, that doesn't tell the full story, right? You have more yards per carry in games that your team loses rather than wins. But, something, if you guys have time to do the math, you could look at how many times does he actually have more yards in games where his team loses rather than wins. I think the reason why I say the more yards per carry in games that his team the reason why I'm talking about yards per carry is because that's the format that ESPN.com has it in. But you can get more specific by looking at how many more yards, he has in those losses rather than wins. I don't want to confuse you though. Long story short, I give Matt Stafford a better chance to get a rushing yard if the Rams lose today rather than wins. I like the Rams to win today, so I think he does not get that rushing yard. Maybe he does and they knee it down again, right? Kyron Williams over under 54.5 rushing yards. Look, he's gone over that line in 16 out of 19 games this season. He's gone over that line in 8 straight games. If you took that to 50+ rushing yards for Kyron Williams, he's gone over that in 18 out of 19 games this season, and 45+ rushing yards in all games that he's played in this season. Even at 60+ guys, Kyron Williams has gone over that line in 15 out of 19 games this season. Now, Seattle is good against the run, though, right? They rank second best in rushing yards allowed per game, third best in rushing yards allowed to running backs this season. Kyron Williams he's had 55+ rushing yards, which is what his line was last that I checked, 54.5. He's gone over that in 3 out of 6 career games against Seattle, but he didn't have a carry in one of those games, so more like 2 out of 5, or excuse me, 3 out of 5. And then he's had 50+ rushing yards in 4 out of 6 career games against Seattle, but more like 4 out of 5. Kyron Williams has more rushing yards per carry in games that his team wins rather than loses in all 4 seasons that he's been in the NFL. So based on that, and I like his success rate. I like his success rate against Seattle. I like that trend that he has more rushing yards per carry in games that his team wins rather than loses in all 4 seasons that he's been in the NFL. So I like Kyron Williams going over those rushing yards today. What worries me a little bit is the fact that Seattle has a very good rush defense. Okay, but I do have to lean towards him getting over that. And then Blake Corum over under 28.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 11 out of 19 games this season. If we took it to 20+, we're looking at 14 out of 19 games, 10+ rushing yards in 18 out of 19 games this season for Blake Corum. And then he's gone over the 28.5 rushing yard line in 1 out of 4 career games against Seattle. The most rushing yards Blake Corum has ever had in a game against Seattle is 48. And then, I mentioned if we took it to 10 plus for Corum, he's gone over that in 18 out of 19 games this season. If we took it to 10 plus, we're looking at 3 out of 4 career games against Seattle. He's had at least 10 rushing yards. And then Blake Corum has more yards per carry on the road than at home in both seasons he's been in the NFL, which is a very small sample size, but it is what it is. And then he has more yards, and that's a good trend for him today. And then he has more yards per carry in games that his team loses rather than wins in both seasons that he's been in the NFL. I think who's the guy that did the pod with us last week? I'm just drawing a blank right now.
We had Gremlin Bag.
Gremlin, yeah. Gremlin and I were talking about Blake Corum, about how it seems like in like blowout victories or losses, he seems to get a few more carries. So, that could be the reason why, that's something that I would look into as well. Do you guys think this is going to be a close game or a blowout? If it's going to be a blowout, from that show that we did, from that episode, if I remember correctly, Blake Corum was more productive in games where the score, the margin of victory is a little bit bigger when one team beats the other team by like 8+ points. But Corum has more yards per carry in games that his team loses rather than wins in both seasons. So I like the Rams to win today. So just because of that, I would have to lean more towards Corum not getting there. I also think this is going to be a more competitive game than the Broncos and Patriots game. So, but I'm not necessarily here to give you, what I think is going to happen. I'm here to give you guys some statistics, right? Hey, JB, you there?
Yep.
Did you want to like go over the store and stuff for just a second?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. I'll be right back, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will be streaming the game later on TikTok. CJ Dupree to get 2 TDs, but yeah, so you guys go and hit that QR code up there, at the top left hand corner. Right? Yeah, obviously gotta snap it with your phone or mobile device, but it takes you to the Not Move Podcast store. You can also go to the website. It's notmove-shop.fourthwall.com. We got Not Move Podcast merchandise. We got, you name it, man. We got links to our sponsors, things and such. We're gonna be doing giveaways. We've done Madden 26 giveaways. Yep. I'll put the link in the chat. But yeah, y'all, we got, telling you, man, being not moved, we should be doing a lot of moving. Yeah, if you guys go there, you guys use promo code not moved, you get 10% off store wide. If you're also on Twitch, right, you guys subscribe on Twitch, you get 5% off automatically in the store. And then you can use promo code not moved to attach an extra 10%. It's also got all the links to our sponsors, Walmart.com, MLB and NFL shop, San Francisco 49ers shop, Kansas City Chiefs Pro shop. We got Open Goal, W energy drinks. Go to w.gg, promo code not moved, 10% off your entire order there. Use it as many times as you want. Unlimited ordering. If you guys are stuck on that nasty carbonated energy drink or pre-workout, man, try that stuff out. Get you something new.
All right. Thank you, JB. So, I think that about does it for the Rams attack here that we've talked about. I think something that we did not talk about is maybe Matt Stafford over 254 and a half passing yards, which he's gone over in 13 out of 19 games this season. And even if you took that to 250 plus, guys, you're still looking at 13 out of 19 games this season. It's where we get to like 175 plus, where he's gone over that in 18 out of 19 games this season. He's gone over the 254 and a half passing yard line in 6 out of 12 career games against Seattle. In the playoff game that he played against Seattle in 2016, which was the only playoff game that he played against Seattle, he had 205 passing yards. Once again, that was back in 2016, so 10 years ago. He's had 200 plus passing yards in 10 out of 12 career games against Seattle. His low was 130 and his high was 457. What are you thinking about Stafford today, JB? Do you think he goes over the 254 and a half passing yards?
Yeah. You got too many passing weapons. That's what they are. They're a pass happy team. I mean, look what he's done all year, man. Played the best football of his career.
Yeah.
I don't see no reason why he wouldn't.
I'm with
I
you,
got
man.
him going that 255. No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Over that.
Yeah, man. I think that looks pretty good too. I guess the only concern that I would have is if the Rams, and I think it's a possibility, but I expect this game to be more competitive. The only concern that I would have is if like the Rams were up by a large margin in the late third quarter and they just continue to run the ball. But anyways, even over the 1.5 touchdown passes, guys, he's gone over that in 16 out of 19 games this season. He's had at least one touchdown pass in 18 out of 19 games this season. And then he's had at least one touchdown pass in 9 out of 12 career games against Seattle. And then he's had at least 2 touchdown passes in 7 out of 12 career games against Seattle. All right. Do you think he throws an interception today, JB? He has thrown an interception in 6 out of 19 games this season. And he's had an interception in more times than not in career games against Seattle. 7 out of 12 career games against Seattle.
He just threw a pick last week, too, didn't he?
Let's go take a look. I think it may have been the game before where he threw a bunch of interceptions. Let me just double check though. So they played Chicago last week? Is that right? Yeah. No, he did not throw an interception against Chicago. Against Carolina, he did.
Total defensive interceptions 18, Seattle 16, Los Angeles. It's number 5 and number 6. Total turnover differential -3 at 19th for Seattle, +10.
Yeah, I mean the Rams do have a big turnover differential advantage against Seattle too. The Rams are +11 and Seattle's -3. I think there's a bigger likelihood of Darnold throwing an interception today.
Yeah, I do too.
Darnold has thrown an interception in half of his games this season. He had a 4 interception game this season, and it was against the Rams. He's thrown for a total. Sam Darnold, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, has thrown an interception, 6 interceptions, a total of 6 interceptions in 2 games that he's played against the Rams this season. And he's thrown an interception in half of his career games against the Rams. And he did throw an interception against the Rams in the 2024 playoffs. I think there's a good chance that, Darnold throws an interception today.
Yeah, I think Darnold throws an interception as well.
But yeah, let's talk about the Seattle side of the ball a little bit here. JSN, what are you expecting him from JSN today, JB? The Rams, they haven't been the greatest at defending against wide receivers, receiving yards, or receptions. His line's listed at 90 and a half, 6.5 receptions. What do you think about JSN today? Or some of these other receivers, Cooper Cup, revenge spot for him. Shaheed.
Yeah, Cooper Cup. Last time he was in this position, he was in another blue. Cooper Cup has been in these moments. I think you take him for yardage, whatnot. Some receptions. JSN though, I think is obviously going to be your that guy. He kind of goes quiet though sometimes, I feel. I dealt with him this off season, going and disappearing at times. Man. Dude, there's nobody comes close to what JSN does though in the production wise, right? Like he's got receiving almost 1,800 yards receiving this year, 10 touchdowns. I don't think there's anybody that even has 600 receiving yards after that. There's not one. There's one. Cooper Cup has 593. Barner is 519. The offense was ran through JSN and to Kenneth Walker. So luckily enough, they have those two guys still. JSN, bro. I mean, they don't get the ball to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Barner. I might like Barner. Shaheed. Let's take Shaheed. Was the sprinkles on top, but looking at their stats from the regular season, man, it's like there's only Darnold, Walker, and JSN on that team.
Yep. I'm with you, man. JSN's got to be the first guy I'm looking at here. He's gone over the 90 and a half receiving yard line in 13 out of 18 games this season. If you guys got that, that's a 70 plus. We're looking at 16 out of 18 games this season. Even if you're going up and saying JSN's going to have 100 plus receiving yards today, half of his games, he's done that this season. He's gone over the 90 and a half receiving yard line in half of his career games against the Rams, which he's played 6 career games against them. And here's the thing is if you took it JSN from 90 and a half down to 70 plus receiving yards, he still has had that in the same amount of games against the Rams throughout his career as he's had 91 plus receiving yards. So he's had 91 plus receiving yards in half of his career games against the Rams, same with 70 plus. He has more yards per catch at home than on the road in 3 out of 3 career seasons that he's been in the NFL, which is a small sample size, right? Not a lot of history, three-year guy, but it's a good trend. It's a good trend since he's playing at home today. And he's gone over his 6.5 reception line in 12 out of 18 games this season. So, if you're looking for 100% success rate with the receptions against the Rams, 3 plus receptions in all career games against the Rams, 4 plus in 4 out of 6 career games. Anyways, yeah, I think those receiving yards are looking pretty decent there for JSN. Cooper Cup, revenge spot for him. It's hard for me to imagine that Cooper Kupp's not going to pick up 31 plus receiving yards against his former team in a playoff game. But if we did want to take that down to 20 plus, we're looking at 15 out of 17 games. Cooper Kupp has had 20 plus receiving yards this season, 15 plus, 16 out of 17 games. He's gone over the 30 and a half receiving yard line in 1 out of 2 career games against the Rams. So he's played 2 career games against his former team, and he's had at least 23 receiving yards in both of those games.
I think with the games on the line, I like the 31. I see him getting it. It is playoffs. Like I said, that's what he's been here for. I mean, he's the second. He's the number 2. He's 593. He's got the second most, receiving yards on the team. So, I mean, he is a valuable weapon to them. but it's just dude's a shell of what he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere near what he was the last time he was in this position. Triple Crown guy. Yeah, I like him for his 30 plus, 31 plus, whatever he said it was. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, Shaheed, man. Now Shaheed has gone over his receiving line in 12 out of 19 games this season, right? His 25 and a half receiving yard line. 12 out of 19 games. He's gone over that this season. But since he's been with the Seahawks, he was with the Saints earlier this year. Since he's been with the Seahawks, he's only gone over that line in 3 out of 10 games this season. And even if we took that to 10 plus receiving yards, he still has only had that in 3 out of 10 games with the Seahawks this season. So a little skeptical on Rashid's receiving yards. I know Blessed Up P down there in the chat liked him for rushing yards, which we talked about at the start of the segment. And I do think that would probably be my favorite option there for Shaheed. Now, he has gone over the 25 and a half receiving yard line in 3 out of 5 career games against the Rams. But if you took that to 10 plus receiving yards, it's the same to 3 out of 5. So I don't see any value in taking Shaheed from 25 and a half down to 10, even 10 plus receiving yards. I think it's the same thing there analytically. And then, something to keep in mind here. We'll talk about anytime touchdown scores here in a minute. But the thing about Shaheed is that he does not have a receiving touchdown while he's been with the Seahawks this season, which is 10 games. So I think if Shaheed does get into the end zone, it'll probably have to be through a kickoff return or something of that nature. So, I think JSN and Cooper Kupp are the guys that I'm looking at here. And, here's the thing about Kupp, too, is that he's had I didn't talk about his reception line at 2.5, but he's had 3 receptions in both career games that he's played against the Rams. So,
Yeah, I like that.
the three plus receptions for Kupp. Yeah, I think 2 plus is even more like comfortable. I think 3 is definitely doable though. Yeah, for sure, man. So maybe JSN yards, Kupp receptions. Although I could see Kupp getting those receiving yards as well. JSN in their last game, he didn't have a lot of yards. He did have a touchdown, but not a lot of receiving yards. One would think with Charbonnet being out, maybe they do look to JSN to move the ball a little bit more. I don't know how many yards Charbonnet picked up last week, but it's an idea, right? It's an idea. Let's see here.
A year he's sitting at 730.
I heard you talking about AJ Barner.
Mhm.
He's gone over his 29 and a half receiving yard line in 7 out of 18 games this season. AJ Barner's the tight end there for Seattle. Now, the Rams have done a good job at preventing tight ends from receiving yards. They rank 7th best in preventing tight ends receiving yards. But the Rams are more vulnerable to receptions allowed to tight ends. The thing about Barner is he's only gone over his 3.5 reception line in 4 out of 18 games this season. So I feel like we would have to take that to at least 3 plus receptions for Barner. He's at least gone over that in more times than not this season. In 10 out of his 18 games that he's played, 2 plus 13 out of 18 games. But here's the thing about Barner is that he's gone over those 3.5 receptions in all 4 career games that he's played against the Rams. His high was 10. So I do still have to lean towards Barner going over the 3.5 receptions, but I feel more comfortable with it at 3 plus. And I think that I would like that more than his receiving yards, right? Because the Rams are more vulnerable to receptions allowed to tight ends more than the receiving yards allowed to tight ends. Although, receiving yards, He's gone over the 29.5 receiving yard line in 3 out of 4 career games against the Rams. If we took that to 27 plus, maybe you guys can take the hook out and drop it a few. He's had at least AJ Barner has had at least 27 receiving yards in all 4 career games against the Rams. Also, Barner has more yards per catch in road games than home games in both seasons that he's been in the NFL, which is a bad trend, but it's a small sample size. And then he has more yards per catch on grass than turf in both seasons he's played in the NFL, which is a bad trend, but a small sample size. It's a bad trend because this game is being played on turf rather than grass, so he's better. Barner accumulates more yards per catch in road games where he plays on grass than home games that he's playing on turf, which is the one that he's playing in today. So in that regard, I'm just going to have to lean more toward Barner getting the 3+ receptions. I'd still lean towards over the 3.5. I think something that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about is Kenneth Walker's receiving yard line. The Rams rank 5th worst in receiving yards allowed to running backs, 6th worst in receptions allowed to running backs. Now, Kenneth Walker doesn't have the most impressive success rate going over the 24.5 receiving line this season, only 6 out of 18 games this season. And only 2 out of 7 career games against the Rams. So here's a spot where even though the Rams are vulnerable to this is not necessarily a spot that I'm looking to target. Receiving yards for Kenneth Walker. Sure, he could get it, right? There are times where the defense is bad at defending against a position where I don't like that team to take advantage of. And there are also times where a defense is good at defending against a specific position that I do want to take advantage of. But this is a time where, the Rams are bad at defending against that receiving yards allowed to running backs, and I'm just not willing to touch. So I don't like his success rate with that. I don't like his success rate against the Rams either. And I don't like the fact that Charbonnet missed that Week 3 game against New Orleans, where Kenneth Walker only had 1 target for 12 yards receiving in that game. So maybe New Orleans was better at defending against that, but still just not a spot that I'm really looking for. But if you guys like it, the Rams are vulnerable to running backs, not just those receiving yards, but receptions allowed. I don't know if I really talked about the rushing game here for Seattle. The Rams rank 11th in rushing yards allowed per game. The Rams rank 21st in passing yards allowed per game. So the Rams are more vulnerable to the pass than they are the run, which doesn't really fit Seattle well because, Seattle is good at passing, right? I know at the beginning of the season or near the middle of the season, they ran the ball. They called a very high percentage of rushing plays, but still ranked like 4th and best in passing yards per game. That's changed a little bit, though. The Seahawks call the 2nd most rushing plays than any other teams in the league this season, and they've dropped down to 13th in passing yards per game. So really, Seattle likes to run the ball. And, that makes me look at those Kenneth Walker rushing yards. And that plays right into the Rams' arsenal there because the Rams are better at defending against the run than the pass compared to other teams in the league. So Kenneth Walker, over under 85.5 rushing yards. He's only gone over that in 5 out of 18 games this season, right? And then career games against the Rams, he's only gone over that in 2 out of 7 career games against the Rams. So not good history there. And in that game that Charbonnet missed earlier this year, Kenneth Walker had 38 rushing yards on 16 carries. So Just not a spot I'm looking for here with Kenneth Walker. Could he do it? Absolutely. But yeah, just not somewhere I'm looking for. If I were to go with a Kenneth Walker prop, it'd probably be more looking like a touchdown. And we'll talk about the touchdowns here in just a second. But I just wanted to mention that rushing prop, and then Sam Darnold's over under on rushing yards. He's gone over this 5.5 rushing yard total in 6 out of 18 games this season. He's gone over that line in all 6 games that he's ever played against the Rams. I like that. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried that he's gone over that line in only 33% of it, 33.33% of his games this season. But all 6 career games against the Rams, Darnold has had 6+ rushing yards. The Rams do rank 8th best in rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks, but hey, I think that's worth a decent look there. And then Sam Darnold has more rushing yards per attempt in games that his team loses rather than wins in 7 out of 8 seasons that he's been in the NFL. So I think Seattle loses today, which makes me like that trend. But if you guys like Seattle to win today, I would give Darnold a smaller chance of getting those rushing yards. Seattle wins, no rushing yards for Darnold. Well, not the 6+. If Seattle loses, which is what I predict, I do predict Darnold to get the 6+ rushing yards. And then, we'll talk about touchdowns here in just a second, guys. I do just want to let you guys know that we haven't talked about explosive plays all through the passing game or the rushing game. Let's talk about the rushing game real quick. The Rams were above average in limiting those explosive plays this season. The 6th fewest 20+ yard rushing gains and the 11th fewest 40+ yard rushing gains. So they've done good at limiting the big rushing gains. Seattle as well. Seattle has allowed the fewest 20+ yard rushing gains this season and the 2nd fewest 40+ yard rushing gains this season. And the reason why I think explosive plays are really important to look at is because, we look at the red zone offense a lot. How are teams doing in the red zone? How often do they get into the red zone? But what if a team is really good? They have a really good red zone defense and they don't allow their opponents to get into the red zone a whole lot. The other team's not very good in the red zone. You're thinking, oh, this team's going to have a tough time scoring touchdowns. But then you see this team's throwing 50-yard touchdowns and all that stuff, those explosive plays. Next thing you know, the team that you liked is down 21-0 on these big plays. Neither of these teams give up big plays on the ground, but I would say the biggest vulnerability out of these teams with that rushing attack is the fact that the Rams allow the 11th fewest 40+ yard rushing gains this season. So I'd give Seattle a bigger chance of getting a big rushing gain. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Charbonnet out or not, but yeah, JB mentioned that Walker's more of their yard getter there on the ground. And then the passing game, Rams have done good at defending against that, and so has Seattle. Really, the Rams have allowed the 12th most 20+ yard receiving gains this season. So I'm sure JSN has a lot of 20+ yard receiving gains, maybe some other guys. Those are the guys that have an added benefit in my, statistically, are the guys that can pick up those 20+ yard rushing or receiving gains for Seattle today. The 40+ receiving gains for Seattle, maybe not so much. The Rams allowed the 5th fewest 40+ yard receiving gains this season. Then Seattle allowed the 10th fewest 20+ yard receiving gains this season and the 15th fewest 40+ yard receiving gains. So Seattle is more vulnerable to the 40+ yard receiving gains relative to other teams in the league than the 20+ yard receiving gains. So maybe a Tutu Atwell, those big explosive play guys for the Rams could be the way to go here, maybe for a long touchdown or just a big game. Let's talk about these anytime touchdowns, though. We didn't talk about the referee in that last game, JB. I do just want to mention in that Patriots, and Broncos game, Alex Kemp is the head referee in that one. The Patriots have a 7-4 record when he refs, and the Broncos are 5-2 when he refs. So I think statistically, the Broncos have a higher winning percentage when he's the ref than New England does. And then, but I still went with New England in that one. And then in this game, the Rams are a perfect 7-0 when this referee refs. Clay Martin. Yeah, and they're 1-0 against Seattle. So I think that takes, we got to look into that a little bit there. Seattle has a 4-3 record. When Clay Martin is the referee and they're 0-1 against the Rams. But I thought that was interesting. I have seen teams lose though this year, guys. Specifically the Chiefs when the referee was like the Chiefs were. I can't tell you how many times I saw earlier this season the Chiefs were 5-0 and this ref the Chiefs, or 6-0, and the Chiefs. I think they lost multiple games this season when they were undefeated with a head referee. But 7-0, pretty decent sample size there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other referee trends you guys could look into if you're interested in that information. But I did just want to mention that.
Yeah, them referees. That's one of my favorite stats.
And then, I do just want to mention before we get into these touchdown props, right? Anytime touchdown props, that the Rams have a slight red zone attempts per game advantage and a slight red zone conversion advantage. When I say a red zone conversion advantage, I mean within the 20-yard line, the Rams are converting, touchdowns at a pretty good rate. Not necessarily field goals, right? That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about red zone conversion. Just touchdowns only, right? So I mentioned I give Rams a slight red zone attempts per game advantage. Yeah, the Rams rank first in the NFL in red zone attempts per game. No other team gets into the red zone more often than the Rams. Seattle ranks 8th in that category. But Seattle's defense is better at preventing opponents from getting into the red zone than the Rams. Seattle ranks 7th in that category. The Rams rank 16th. Where I see big separation is, the red zone conversion rates. The Rams rank 7th in that category in red zone conversion rate. Seattle ranks 21st. But both of these defenses are very similar in ranking in opponent red zone conversion rate. So overall, I give the Rams a bigger likelihood of scoring touchdowns today, at least in the red zone, right? So let's look at these anytime touchdown props. I looked at the history. The guys I have on my list here, I may not have looked at everybody, right? But the guys that I have on my list here for the Rams, we have Stafford, Kyron Williams, Corum, Nakua, Adams, Mumpfield, Xavier Smith, Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell, Parkinson, Higbee, and Ferguson. The Rams that have scored a touchdown on Seattle throughout history that I have on my list here is a lot of them, really. Stafford, Williams, Corum, Adams, Atwell, Parkinson, Higbee, Ferguson. And then for Seattle, I have some guys on my list here, and I think maybe all of these guys have scored a touchdown against the Rams, except Cooper Kupp. I have Darnold, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, JSN, Shaheed, and Barner on my list here, and all of them, are on that. All of them have scored a touchdown, at least one touchdown against the Rams throughout history, except for Cooper Kupp. But on my list here, okay. So let's talk about Rams anytime touchdown first. So the Seahawks were most vulnerable to quarterbacks rushing touchdowns. this season relative to other positions and relative to other teams in the league. They allowed 3 quarterback rushing touchdowns, but look, Stafford has only rushed for a touchdown in 1 out of 11 regular season games against Seattle. He didn't rush for a touchdown in that lone playoff game. So 1 out of 12 career games against Seattle has Matt Stafford rushed for a touchdown, and he hasn't rushed for a touchdown this season, I don't believe. So let me double check that. Yeah, he hasn't. So that kind of goes out the window for me. But if you guys do like Stafford to get into the end zone today for a rushing touchdown, Seattle has been vulnerable to that, somewhat vulnerable compared to other teams and compared to other vulnerabilities at other positions that they guard. The next position that I would look at is the wide receiver and tight end positions here for the Rams. What I say, wide receiver and tight end. So, when we look at the touchdown leaders here for the Rams, Kyron Williams does lead the team, but the fact that I mentioned wide receivers and tight ends makes me look at Devontae Adams, Nakua, Parkinson, maybe even Ferguson or even Davis Allen has 3 receiving touchdowns this season. So even these third string tight ends for the Rams have shown that they can catch touchdown passes this year, right? So which one has the best history? Let's look at Devontae Adams versus Nakua first. So Nakua has scored 1+ touchdowns in 2 out of 5 career games against Seattle, compared to Devontae Adams, who has scored a touchdown in 4 out of 11 career games. So pretty similar there. They both have also had a 2 touchdown game. Nakua has had 2+ touchdowns in 1 out of 5 career games against Seattle. And then Devontae Adams has had a 2+ touchdown game in 1 out of 11 career games against Seattle. I believe, I'm surprised I don't have it in my notes here, but I believe, and I'll look it up real quick. I believe Devontae Adams leads this team in red zone target share. Maybe even the NFL. Yeah, I mean, he ranks 3rd best in the entire NFL in red zone target share. So I got to lean with Adams to get a touchdown over Nakua. What are you thinking, JB? If you had to pick one of those two, Adams or Nakua?
Oh, Puka.
Puka. Yeah. I think Puka, maybe has even had more touchdowns as of late than Adams, right? I mean, Puka Nakua had a touchdown in his last 4 out of 5 games, compared to Devontae Adams, who hasn't scored a touchdown in his last 4 games. So I'm calling for Adams to break that streak today. JB would have to lean more towards Nakua getting a touchdown there. And then, I mentioned a tight end, flip a coin, which tight end is going to get one. Parkinson has had a touchdown in 1 out of 4 career games against Seattle, more like 1 out of 3 since he wasn't targeted in one of those games. Higbee, 3 out of 18 career games, but wasn't targeted, so more like 3 out of 17. Then Terrence Ferguson, 1 out of 2 career games. So really 1 out of 1 career game, since he wasn't targeted in one of those games either. You would still roll with Parkinson today, JB, for an anytime touchdown over the other tight ends here? Is that right?
Parkinson's. What, between all 4 games or just these 2?
No, just between all the tight ends for the Rams.
Oh, for the Rams, yeah, Parkinson's and Higbee, being 1 and 2, and then Ferguson at 3.
I like the fact that Ferguson has a touchdown in the only game that he was targeted against Seattle. I'm not like too impressed with the fact that Parkinson has a touchdown in 1 out of 3 career games against Seattle. Higbee, what would I say, 3 out of 17. So I'll just lean towards the sleepier side of things here and go with Ferguson for an anytime touchdown on that one. And then running backs receiving touchdowns. So I guess the third look would be a running back here for the Rams would be the third option that I'd go with. So, I mean, Kyron Williams, obviously, he was the touchdown leader for this team this season, 16, and in the playoffs, 16 total touchdowns this season. And then it was Devontae with 14, Puka Nacua with 13, Colby Parkinson with 9. But I think today is a day where I'm just not necessarily looking for Kyron Williams. Could he get in? Absolutely. But, Seattle has only allowed 2 receiving touchdowns this season to running backs. And they've allowed the fewest rushing touchdowns to running backs this season. They've allowed 5, only 5.
Wow, Seattle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think Kyron Williams has his hands full today in regards to getting into the end zone, but it could happen, right? Anything can happen. And then just so you guys know, Blake Corum has scored a touchdown in 1 out of 4 career games against Seattle. Mumpfield, 0 out of 2 career games against Seattle, but he wasn't targeted in one of those games. Xavier Smith did not score a touchdown in 4 career games against Seattle, but he wasn't targeted in 2 of those games, so more like 0 out of 2. Whittington, wide receiver for the Rams, hasn't scored in 3 career games against Seattle. Tutu Atwell, we talked about him, JB. He has scored a touchdown in 1 out of 9 career games against Seattle, but 3 of those games he didn't have a target or a rush attempt, so it's more like 1 out of 6. I think that's a decent look here today for an anytime touchdown. Tutu Atwell. But let's get into the Seahawks side of the ball here. For an anytime touchdown possibility for the Seattle Seahawks. In my notes here, I have that the Rams are vulnerable to wide receiver scoring touchdowns first and foremost. They've allowed 16 this season, right? So JSN has scored at least 1 touchdown in 2 out of 6 career games against the Rams. He's had a 2+ touchdown game and 1 out of 6 of those games. And then Cooper Kupp, I already mentioned, he hasn't scored a touchdown in any career games against the Rams. Shaheed has scored a touchdown in 1 out of 5 career games against the Rams. But, I didn't look at Shaheed if he has ever had a kickoff return or a punt return against the Rams. So you may want to look that information up. And you may want to look at the rules, too, if you're, taking him for a anytime touchdown in the book that you're using. I know there was some controversy last week on Shaheed's kickoff return for a touchdown, whether that should be categorized as an anytime touchdown for Rashid Shaheed or for the special teams. So that's definitely a rule worth looking into. They ended up counting it for both, I believe. So anybody who picked Shaheed anytime touchdown was awarded, and anybody who picked special teams / defense was awarded for an anytime touchdown there. And I already mentioned, though, Shaheed hasn't had a receiving touchdown while he's been with the Seahawks this season. So that makes me narrow it down to JSN and Cooper Kupp for the most part, right? And the fact that Cooper Kupp doesn't have a touchdown in 2 career games against the Rams really just leaves me with JSN for an anytime touchdown. How are we feeling about that, JB? JSN anytime touchdown?
Yeah. I think that's it. Between JSN and Jason for the anytime touchdown. I don't like really anybody else. Maybe Barner.
Yeah. We'll talk about Barner. I actually think Barner's a decent look here, but I think Barner's a good look. But Yeah, man. I know you don't like necessarily going with those big names in games like this, and that's understandable, JB. But out of the wide receiving corp, out of those three, I have to lean towards JSN getting an anytime touchdown, which really comes to no surprise, right? But the next person that I would be looking at is AJ Barner, because the Rams ranked 13th worst in tight ends receiving touchdowns allowed this season. That's their second biggest vulnerability. And AJ Barner has had a touchdown in 2 out of 4 career games against the Rams. So I think that's a good look there. And then running backs receiving touchdowns here against the Rams is their third biggest vulnerability. And Kenneth Walker, he scored a touchdown in 2 out of 7 career games against the Rams. That could be better, but that's not terrible. And he does have, he doesn't have a receiving touchdown this season. So that makes me like really skeptical about Kenneth Walker for an anytime touchdown today. And then was there anything else that I really wanted to? I think that pretty much does it there. I do just want to mention that Darnold has rushed for a touchdown in 1 out of 6 career games against the Rams. One of those games were in the playoffs in 2024, which he did not rush for a touchdown. And the Rams were pretty good at limiting quarterback rushing touchdowns this season. They only allowed 1. So I'm a little skeptical about Darnold getting in there today, but anything could happen, right? Any given Sunday. Defensive touchdowns, anytime defensive touchdowns. I just want to let you guys know that, there's only been 1 defensive touchdown in the last 10 meetings between these teams. It was the Rams. They had a pick 6 back in 2024. But Seattle did have a punt return for a touchdown on 12/18/2025. I'm just not counting that as a defensive touchdown, but that was a special teams touchdown. And then before I get out of here, we'll do the first touchdown of the game, right? The Rams have scored the first touchdown of the game in 12 out of 19 games this season. The Seahawks have scored the first touchdown in 13 out of 18 games this season. So Seattle has scored the first touchdown in a higher percentage of games this season than the Rams have. I do know in week 11, Kyron Williams had the first touchdown in that game, and that game was against Seattle. What about the most recent game between these two? Let me go look that up real quick. Schedule. They played the Rams here in week 16, who scored the first touchdown in that one, Charbonnet. So it was a running back in both of the games that these teams have played in. Kyron Williams scored the first touchdown in the one in week 11, and then in week 16, I think it was the last time the Rams and Seahawks played. Charbonnet got into the end zone, but he's out today, right? But Kyron Williams does have the highest success rate for first touchdown score of the game for the Rams. 5 out of 19 games this season, Kyron Williams scored the first touchdown of the game. He has scored the first touchdown for his team in 7 out of 19 of those games, which I believe out of all the games today, which is just 2, out of all the games today, Kyron Williams scored the first touchdown the most for his team, 7 out of 19, and I think 5 out of 19 first touchdown of the game in the highest.
I can see that for sure
as well. And then Nacua has scored the first touchdown of the game in 3 out of 19 games this season. Every time that Nacua scored the first touchdown of the game this season, it was the first one for his team as well. I guess I had that backwards. But yeah, 3 out of 19 games, Nacua has scored the first touchdown of the game and the first touchdown for his team. Devontae Adams scored the first touchdown of the game in 2 out of 19 games this season. He scored the first for his team in 4 out of 19 games this season. Mumpfield has scored the first touchdown of 1 out of 19 games this season. Higbee scored the first touchdown in 1 out of 19 games this season. Terrence Ferguson scored the first touchdown for his team in 2 out of 19 games this season. So never has Ferguson had the first touchdown of the game this season, and then Corum has scored the first touchdown for his team in 1 out of 19 games this season. So statistically, yeah, Kyron Williams to score the first touchdown of the game looks pretty decent there, but Seattle did score the first touchdown in the game more time at a higher rate than the Rams did this season. But Charbonnet was the guy, man, and he's out. And then so the next man up is going to be JSN, who scored the first touchdown of the game in 3 out of 18 games this season. He actually scored the first touchdown for his team in 5 out of 18 of those games this season. Torrey Horton, who's out, that's another hit for Seattle. He was a guy who scored the first touchdown a couple times. Barner, we've talked about him, scored the first touchdown of the game in 1 out of 18 games this season. Same with his team. Shaheed scored the first touchdown of the entire first touchdown for Seattle in 2 out of 18 games this season, but he hasn't played 2 out of 10 games, I should say. They were both kickoff returns. Shaheed just both the times he had his first touchdown of the game were both kickoff returns. So I would definitely go see if the Rams are vulnerable to that kickoff game. And then Kenneth Walker has not scored the first touchdown of the game this season, but he has scored the first touchdown for his team in 1 out of 18 games this season. And then Seattle defense scored one time there. So I suppose JSN, if we said, okay, Seahawks have scored a higher touchdown, have scored the first touchdown at a higher rate than the Rams. That eliminates the Rams. And then, looks like JSN, scored the first touchdown of the game in 3 out of 18 games this season. So that would be, mathematically the probably the best look there is JSN to score the first touchdown of the game. Who are you feeling like, though, JB? If we throw the stats out of the window, who do you feel like scores the first touchdown today?
No, man.
Who are you just feeling in your bones, man?
Please, who do I think? In both games?
Yeah.
So Rams, Seattle. I think it will be. I'm just gonna go with Puka. Puka's gonna score the first for the Rams, and for that game, for the Patriots and Broncos, dude, man. I'm gonna say, what's his face, Harvey. Maybe Mims.
Hunter Hurst Harvey, Triple H.
Yes.
If I'm just going based off feel, right? I've kind of already told you guys analytically what the numbers look like, but just based off feel, I'm thinking first touchdown in the Seattle game and the Rams has got to be. And I don't know if he has a first touchdown of the game this season, but it doesn't look like he does. Tutu Atwell. That's going out on a limb there. I think Terrence Ferguson is a decent look if you were going for a sleeper. I just feel like in this one, it's going to be a player that nobody really expects. But, statistically, once again, JSN was the good look there. If not, Kyron Williams if the Rams were to score first. And then for this other game, Denver and New England, give me Booty to score the first touchdown.
Okay.
Wide receiver for New England, but statistically, Douglas, man. Douglas was looking good there. But Denver had scored at a higher success rate, so Sutton looks like statistically the guy to get that first touchdown in the Broncos game. So Sutton and JSN, let's see if the statistics pan out there. Sutton and JSN first TDs.
Apparently Rashid Shaheed.
Pete Alonso touchdown, says Blessed Up Pete. Yeah, we have baseball right around the corner, guys. I'll be doing baseball shows. I've been doing a few basketball shows here and there when I can. But now that football season's wrapped up or wrapping up, I'll have some more time to do that.
Got one more game.
So I guess let's give a final score prediction in this Rams and Seahawks game, JB. What are we thinking?
I'm gonna go 2017. I'm gonna go 2017. Oh, dude, Rams. I really want to go with the Seattle Seahawks. But
Why? Why are you thinking Seattle?
man, the defense, the way that the running game, I don't know. They're a really good defense, and then
Yeah.
like I said, storyline. Okay, so when Mike McDonald took over the job, okay, he brought his whole team in, and he had a or like not a press conference, but like he was in the auditorium, had his whole team in, and was like introducing himself to his team, and was like, "Look, from this many months, I think it was like 12 months, from 12 months from today." He was like, or like he did like a timeline. 3 months from today, we're gonna be in training camp. From 3 months from then, we're gonna be here. From then to then, and he said, and within 12 months or something to that effect, he projected his first year, second year. I forget exactly what it was, but he's only off by like 8 months in his prediction of being where he's at. But he's got his team playing the exact way that he instilled, like what he instilled. They bought into it. That's man. That's one reason why like I kind of want to go with Seattle. Man, it is the storyline there at home. Sam Darnold has everything to prove, right? Everything, all everything's against Sam Darnold, just as everything's against the Denver Broncos and Stidham. And that's why I want to go with the Denver Broncos winning 24-21 and Seattle Seahawks winning 20-17.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough, man. I totally understand that. I feel like, oh yeah, that's gonna probably be the popular play today, right? Patriots and Rams. I'm not sure what the betting splits are on that Rams Seahawks game, but I feel like I'm going with the Patriots because, like I mentioned at the start of the show, I know a lot of people are going to be on the Patriots today, but I think there's just enough Patriot hate out there for a little bit of the money in a little bit of the money to come in on Denver. Covering for the Patriots. I mean, I feel worse about that Patriots game than I do the Rams game. I feel comfortable the Rams are going to win this game, if not at least cover. I think it's at 2.5 in this Rams game, right? Bumping up to 3.5 if I was playing the spread. But I do think the Rams are going to end up winning today, and I feel better than that than the Patriots covering. I think I feel better about the Rams winning today than the Patriots too, even though the Patriots are favored and the Rams are underdogs. But I do feel good about decently about both of them winning today. So, the over-under in this game, let's go take a look at what that is. I will say that
the games today are what, 2 p.m. Eastern and 5:30 p.m. Eastern, right?
I'm seeing 3 p.m. Eastern and 6:30 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, yeah, okay. So yeah, it's showing me then our time.
And then I see the over under 45.5 in this Patriot or this Rams and Seahawks game. I see that 6 of the last 10 games between the Rams and Seahawks that were played in Seattle had a combined total of 46 plus points. So more times than not in the last 10 games these teams have played, it's gone over the 45.5 line here. So I guess I'll go over that. Give me right on the money there, 26-20 Rams. 20 20 Rams win, 31 to 13 New England wins against the Broncos. But even though my prediction is New England to win by 18 points against the Broncos, I do feel better about the Rams, covering, winning. I just, that Stidham factor, worries me. Is this backup quarterback going to come in today and surprise everybody? I mean, he had a game where he went 14 for 15 in the preseason passing, 14 attempts, 15 attempts, 14 completions, and Denver has done a great job at protecting Bo Nix this year. So, I mean, I would think that he has some good time in the pocket against a team who's just been average in sacks per game to opposing teams, New England. So
I think the Broncos have a very good chance at this. Probably better than Seattle.
Well, I think that about does it, man. That's about all I have to say. Other than obviously, thank you to the supporters, subscribers, followers, everybody in chat, or just hanging out with us. We really appreciate you guys. I hope this information was useful for you, and I hope that all of you win today. And then thank you also to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the NFL, MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks.
Yeah.
Anything else, JB? You going to be on TT streaming the games?
Yep. We will be on TikTok streaming the games. We'll probably have 2 of them up, one where everybody can be, and we're going to be talking. So if you don't want to hear us talking, you can go find the other one where nobody will be. Appease both parties.
Right on. All right. Well, anything else, man?
No. I think that's it. All I got.
All right.
Championship.
Yep. Good luck today, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys here soon.
Yep.
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.